and would like to express our gratitude both to CODESRIA as well as the Center for African Studies in Basel for enabling such a substantive contribution to the academic development of the laureates. Although it is a comparatively small cohort of laureates, the exchanges within as well as outside of the classroom are all the more intense and meaningful. Note that this is a product of the qualitatively high-standing organization and program of the summer school. However, it would not be as impactful without the personal engagement and vision on the side of CODESRIA as well as the Center for African Studies in Basel. And it is this personal engagement that makes the summer school so special. Wishing you stimulating debates, unexpected encounters, and many, many wonderful conversations over coffee or lunch that we have all missed so very much. With gratitude and all best wishes from the Foundation, Omodili, Lucy Kashlin. Now, I just want to take this opportunity to say that it has been the practice of the Foundation to offer scholarships and stipends to the participants of the summer school. So this practice consists in either offering people, I mean, this is usually one scholarship for someone who might want to complete their PhD in Basel, or anyone who might want to go to Basel and spend some time there, like 6 months. So what happens is that after the summer school, the foundation will send a call for applications to those who participated. Now, of course, this refers mainly to those people who were selected directly for the summer school. So not UNISA people, but those who were selected for the summer school. And then so all of those are free and will be invited to apply for any of those facilities that the foundation offers. That is something that's done by the foundation, not by the Center for African Studies. It's done by the foundation. It's the foundation that sets up the selection committee, which then chooses the people who can be offered such a scholarship. And we, at the university, we just host the people who are selected. There's a preference for people who are willing. I mean, there's actually no preference. But of course, if people want to go to the University of Basel, that's highly welcome. But people might also want to go to some other university in Switzerland or in Europe. So there's no limitation as far as the foundation is concerned. The idea is that the foundation wants to give people the opportunity to spend time abroad with better access to resources. So books and conferences and the like. So you will get an email from the foundation and from CODESRIA, I think. And then those of you who are interested in applying can apply. And if you are lucky, you'll be selected and you'll have that opportunity. So like I said, we had already a lot of people coming to Basel, a lot of bright young scholars who I think have profited a lot from spending time there and interacting with colleagues at the University of Basel. Okay, so that's it as far as that is concerned. Okay, now our program today is on objectivity, and basically what I want to address is the relationship between objectivity and knowledge. Yesterday we already had a few ad hoc inputs on that notion. I think the general mood here is one of suspicion, or at least of some, reservations concerning the notion of objectivity, which is understandable given the history of knowledge production on Africa. But I think it is incumbent upon us to reflect even more on the challenges which objectivity poses to us. And that is why this morning session and the afternoon session will be focusing actually on getting a better understanding or fostering a more critical understanding of the notion of objectivity. So we will talk about truth. We'll talk about the relationship between ideas and facts. And of course, we'll talk about objectivity, and then how that all bears on the production of knowledge. And at the end, I will share with you the assignment for this afternoon. Perhaps we can have a different group composition. Today, the only one that will not change is the Francophone group. And then we can take things up from there. Now, before we move into the subject for today, that is objectivity, there is that assignment from yesterday and that kept you awake for so long. So maybe we should deal with that now. Maybe it will take us a lot of time. It doesn't matter because it's very important. So let's just go into that. Yeah. So would anyone like to start? That's the big question. Okay, it looks like it's the Francophone group.
Ok. Bonjour à tous. Nous avons travaillé comme convenu sur le résumé de l'activité d'hier. Et là, nous avons changé le concept comme recommandé par le professeur. Et nous avons choisi celui de civilisation. Ici, nous avons pour contexte, nous avons dit que au XVIIIe siècle, la classification des êtres humains les plus évolués, également celui du déni historique, a été en dehors de toute la culture occidentale. Et dans ce contexte, l'Afrique a été perçue comme un continent anhistorique. Anhistorique pourquoi? Parce que l'Afrique a été considérée par certains anthropologues, des philosophes, des ethnologues, tels que Karl Ritter, Kant et Hegel, ainsi que Lévi-Bruhl, comme un continent n'ayant ni religion, ni culture, ni art. Toutefois, si l'on se réfère à ces écrits de ces auteurs que je viens d'énumérer, l'on croirait donc que ce continent est dépourvu de civilisation, tel que cité par ces auteurs. Cependant, n'est-il pas paradoxal que le dénier à l'Afrique une civilisation alors qu'elle est le berceau de l'humanité serait, tel que l'a dit Cheikh Anta Diop, L'Afrique aurait-elle une historiographie? Alors, existe-t-il un peuple sans civilisation? Et l'on se pose dans cette question, ça nous laisse... La civilisation n'est-elle pas inhérente à l'homme? Cette question, nous comptons premièrement dans cette étude à élucider d'abord le concept de civilisation. Comment comprendre la notion de civilisation en Afrique et dans le monde? Deuxièmement, nous avons pour objectif dans cette étude de montrer qu'il existe non une civilisation, mais plutôt une pluralité de civilisations en Afrique. Et en troisième point, nous allons aborder le concept de civilisation africaine dans toute sa diversité. Au niveau du contenu, nous avions tout à l'heure dit que nous allions définir d'abord le concept de civilisation. Et ici, nous avons considéré la civilisation comme un ensemble de réalités matérielles, immatérielles, spirituelles créées par l'homme. Il s'agit donc de tout ce que l'homme a acquis et de tout ce que l'homme a acquis durant son évolution pour son humanisation. Et c'est par l'homme que se distingue, c'est par cette évolution-là, cette humanisation que l'homme se distingue de son état primipare, de son état animal. Ainsi donc, dénier à un peuple une civilisation, c'est lui ôter toute son humanité. Concernant l'existence d'une pluralité de civilisations en Afrique, nous savons tous que chaque pays d'Afrique est constitué de plusieurs peuples et chaque peuple a une civilisation à elle. Et ces civilisations-là, cette pluralité fait de l'Afrique ses richesses. C'est ça qui fait l'originalité de l'Afrique par rapport à l'Occident. D'où la nécessité pour ces civilisations-là de coexister, de trouver un moyen d'harmonie, d'existence harmonisée entre elles. Et comment donc coexister face à cette pluralité, sans toutefois créer des différences, des supériorités ou alors une hiérarchisation complémentaire entre elles. La civilisation africaine est donc dans toute sa diversité une richesse pour l'Afrique, pour le continent. Si on va dans cette idée selon laquelle l'Afrique a été institutrice de l'humanité de par toutes ces civilisations, en ce sens que certains savants comme Thalès, Pythagore, pour ne citer que ceux-ci, ont été des étudiants en Égypte. Nous savons tous que l'Égypte a été, dans l'histoire, le pays dans lequel a débuté certaines civilisations. Par exemple, c'est en Égypte qu'on a découvert les hiéroglyphes, les écritures hiéroglyphes. L'Afrique est le berceau de l'humanité. C'est en Afrique qu'on a également trouvé les pyramides égyptiennes qui sont la configuration d'une architecture typique en Afrique. Ces pyramides égyptiennes font donc une particularité dans l'histoire architecturale. Toutefois, nous avons également la médecine. La médecine en Égypte peut nous montrer que grâce à la momification, les momies, le phénomène de momie, les Égyptiens ont trouvé un moyen, une technique pour conserver les cadavres pendant des siècles. Et de nos jours, dans la médecine évoluée, on utilise plutôt le formol. Ce phénomène a commencé en Égypte. Cette technique de conservation des corps est donc un exemple de l'existence d'une production du savoir en Afrique. Nous avons également comme exemple les mathématiques. À Blombos, qui est une grotte en Afrique du Sud, une pierre a été trouvée. Et cette pierre-là est le symbole de l'existence de la découverte des mathématiques en Afrique. Cette pierre-là est constituée, qui mesure une longueur de 4 cm de long, a sur elle gravé des formes de triangles. Ces triangles-là sont des symboles de décompte en mathématiques. Nous avons également comme autre exemple la charte du Mandé. La charte du Mandé qui est celle-là, qui est la première déclaration des droits de l'homme et de la démocratie en Afrique. Bien entendu, au regard de ce contexte de départ, selon lequel selon lequel l'Afrique dispose d'une pluralité de civilisations, comment est-ce que nous devons donc trouver des valeurs normatives pour la coexistence pacifique entre toutes ces civilisations-là? Nous avons donc identifié ici quelques nombres de règles que nous avons par exemple la tolérance, le respect de l'autre, la complémentarité, pour permettre une coexistence pacifique entre toutes ces civilisations. Ainsi donc, pour ne pas tomber dans le piège de l'européocentrisme, les Africains devraient donc trouver un moyen de reconnaître leurs valeurs, de reconnaître leur potentialité, leurs richesses, qui sont ces pluralités de civilisations-là, de trouver ensemble des moyens d'existence pacifique pour que l'Afrique puisse montrer à travers le monde qu'elle dispose d'un potentiel. Ce potentiel-là qui sont des savoirs endogènes, des richesses produites par elle-même, et se les approprier, et non les laisser produire par des Occidentaux. Ainsi donc se termine cette présentation du groupe 1. Nous vous remercions pour votre aimable attention. Merci.
Thank you very much. That was an interesting statement about civilization in Africa. I'm feeling so bad about what I'm going to say now. Because you use the words you shouldn't have used. You shouldn't have used the word Africa. You shouldn't have used the word civilization. You shouldn't have used religion, culture, art, continent. You should have avoided all those concepts. That was the point of the exercise. I know I know it's awkward, and look, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you are not okay. I just want to draw your attention to the difficulty of the exercise, because you see, if we pay attention to what you are saying, we can also say that you are basically looking at Africa using the terms that you want to escape. You know, there's no escaping colonization if you respond to the denial of civilization by basically saying, "But we are civilized." You accept the terms of the argument. Now, you can do that, but it may be limiting. Yeah, it may be limiting. But you had, for example, you had a very nice statement, and that statement was, this set of material and spiritual and whatever cultural realities. I think that's a good way of paraphrasing the notion of civilization. But it opens it up, right? So you are, because concepts are almost like black boxes, right? So we need to open them up to see what's in there, right? And so by avoiding the concept of civilization directly and trying to abstract from it in the way that you did by saying, every community of individuals can be defined by the set of material, material realities, right? And we know of a place where you don't find just one set, but several, right? And these communities were able to, produce artifacts that document human ingenuity, creativity, innovation, right? In such a way that the idea that certain sets may be superior than others is highly problematic and can lead to, forms of relating among communities that are not conducive to the full development, I don't know, of these sets of. Do you see what I'm doing? Right? So I'm trying to paraphrase all of this in a way that I will be able to identify the bigger, the larger, the deeper scope of what I'm trying to do here. And that is the challenge. That's the challenge. It's not easy, but that's the challenge. Okay. Don't feel bad. I'm already feeling bad. You shouldn't feel bad. You did your best, and I think it was really interesting what you had to say. But the question is always, have we moved beyond? Have we now seen anything that we don't know or that we didn't know? And in fact, everything that you said is stuff that we know, stuff that you know. Um, I, concerning the rules, I found it very nice. I mean, what you said about the rules. So, talking about toleration and respect and all of that. I think that's a clever move. Yeah. Of course, there again, we might find other ways of putting that, because for example, one of the things about Western civilization is that it prides itself on being tolerant, but we know from history that it hasn't been, right? And so what you are saying, what you're suggesting, by appealing to the notion of toleration, is that you want to be better than them. Yeah, you want to beat them on their own game. Je pensais que vous voulez dire quelque chose.
Merci. Bon, je voulais le dire avant votre développement. On nous a également enseigné qu'il y a des mots qui n'ont pas de synonyme, qu'il y a des mots qui ne peuvent trouver d'équivalence. Quand par exemple, lorsque vous nous aviez demandé hier de faire l'exercice, j'ai tout de suite pensé à l'Afrique. Quand on prend le continent africain, ou l'Afrique, le mot Afrique, je ne trouve pas de synonyme, disons, de terminologie pouvant remplacer convenablement l'Afrique, à moins de dire les 54 pays, mais 54 pays d'où? Donc, la difficulté de l'exercice réside aussi dans cette difficulté de trouver des terminologies pour dire autrement ce que nous avons envie de dire. Et nous savons, moi j'ai fait une maîtrise en linguistique et on nous a enseigné qu'il n'y a pas de traducteur, que le traducteur en réalité est un traître. il peut pas dire exactement autrement ce qui a été dit par quelqu'un d'autre. Et lorsque nous revenons maintenant à la langue dans laquelle nous nous exprimons, tout ce qui a été dit ici, si moi je dois le dire dans ma langue, je trouverai des mots meilleurs que ce qui a été dit parce que c'est dans cette langue-là que j'ai été moulée bien avant d'aller à l'école. Donc, notre difficulté déjà, c'est comme hier lorsqu'on faisait le travail, je disais que c'était même un piège ce travail-là, vraiment qu'on se retrouve à vouloir réfléchir dans une autre langue sur une problématique qui nous concerne, qui fait partie intrinsèque de notre être même. Donc, je ne sais pas, vous aurez le temps de mieux nous édifier, de nous dire ce qu'il en est concrètement. Merci.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. But I want to take up the challenge. Can I ask everyone here to find a replacement for Africa? Yeah.
Well, you can use also Azania.
No, not a lexical
Okay.
replacement. I want you to define it in a way that we can recognize it, but without using the word Africa.
Well, okay. Can I make an example? So in my study, I didn't want to use African philosophy and African philosophy of Ubuntu. So what I did was to say I will use Bantu knowledges and Bantu culture and how they think and philosophize about community.
Okay, the thing with, I mean, that's a good suggestion. The thing with Bantu is that it's a type within a class, right? So you're defining Africa by its constituent elements. So I want us to go further than that. There was one there, and then
You said constituent element, but maybe the place or the continent where humanity began.
okay, that's very good. Yeah, we can say that. Okay, yeah,
Alors, ce ne sera pas un
Black
concept
race.
de substitution, mais ce sera en fait une définition.
Nous n'avons pas entendu ce qu'elle a dit.
Ouais, alors, il y a Luc Sunjun qui a donné une définition de l'Afrique en disant que c'est l'espace situé de part et d'autre du Sahara.
Okay, that's a geographical definition. It's okay, yeah, it's okay, but you know, I want something substantive.
Ce qu'elle a dit, on n'a pas entendu ça parce qu'elle ne l'a pas dit dans le micro. Ça n'a pas été traduit.
Black race. Black race. Black people. Oh, black people. Farafina. Yeah.
A source of human nature or humankind?
Say that again.
Source of humankind. Yeah.
For me is humanity.
Okay, humanity. Yeah. Okay.
Bonjour. En fait, moi, j'ai une inquiétude. En voulant définir l'Afrique ou bien remplacer le terme par un autre, est-ce qu'on ne verse pas dans les jugements de valeur aussi? Par exemple, tout à l'heure, elle a parlé du berceau de l'humanité. Ça, on peut dire que c'est une position, ça peut être une position personnelle qui peut être réfutée. Moi, j'aurais dit, par exemple, le peuple anhistorique, entre guillemets. Anhistorique, un peuple qui n'a pas d'histoire, parce qu'on a tantôt, disons, défini l'Afrique comme étant comme telle. C'est pour cela que quand vous demandez qu'on essaie de remplacer l'Afrique par autre chose, on risque de verser dans les jugements de valeur. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire précisément?
No, that's a great statement. You see, because that gives substance to the attempt, that we are trying to make here. So you are making a substantive statement, and of course, to make a substantive statement, you will have to move into the field of values, of value judgments. There's no way of escaping that. You are trying to make sense of something. How can you make sense of something without taking into account context and content? So context in the sense of the thing that makes you want to define Africa, right? So the thing that makes you want to define Africa cannot just be objective. It will have to be, it will have to take its cue from values, from preferences, from beliefs, from, all sorts of things. And that does not mean that it will not be controversial. It will be controversial, right? But, I'm surprised that we're not seeing things like, this place inhabited by people who have been the victims of capitalism or of history of oppression or something, or this place where people have taken up their destiny into their own hands, and this place where people have shown that you see what I mean. There are so many ways of thinking about Africa which do not commit us to simply say Africa. Because you see, the problem here is that if we use the word Africa, we all think we know what we are talking about. But each one of us has a different understanding of that. If I say Africa and a Swiss colleague says Africa, or someone who does not have my political views says Africa, are we talking about the same thing? Yeah.
But she said black people, because black carries that exact meaning you just described here, because black is an ethical, political.
That's why I accepted it. Because I thought that she was speaking to the whole history of racism, right? And so you can understand Africa from that perspective, yeah. Or maybe she was speaking about pride. It's okay with me. Mhm.
And then another thing, when I said Bantu, for me, it's to mean these people are so ancient. It speaks to the existence that these people have been. When you talk about Bantu people, this is an old concept, how people described themselves through the into, from Egypt to south to.
Yeah, I think the explanation makes sense. The only problem with Bantu, the one that I was pointing to, is that Africans are not just Bantu. uh, we have Nilotic people, we have Nilotic Sudanese, we have many groups that define Africa. So it would be reductionist. Okay, I think Joël, oui, vous voulez dire quelque chose?
Moi, précédemment, bonjour à tous. Précédemment, ce que je voulais dire, c'est que on a tous ici une assise théorique. Ce qu'on dit habituellement, c'est que chacun d'entre nous a un background théorique qui fait que dans le langage conceptuel qu'il utilise, c'est un peu difficile, je ne dirais pas d'être innovant, mais d'arriver à une phase de conceptualisation qu'on pourrait comprendre. Et c'est l'essence de l'exercice que vous nous demandez. Pour ma part, hier, quand vous avez eu à faire part des canons, j'ai tout de suite compris que l'exercice qu'on serait amené à faire pourrait se résumer à un dépassement des canons que vous avez présentés. Et hier, dans le groupe, avec tout le monde, on s'est dit, mais cet exercice, on le fait. Il est fort probable qu'au lendemain, connaissant la perspicacité du collège d'enseignants et vous, ça serait remis en question. On l'a dit. Oumar est là. Et aujourd'hui, ce que moi, je vous demande, c'est comment faire ce dépassement en essayant de faire une rupture de tout ce background théorique qu'on a.
That's precisely what I'm trying to do now. So I picked up, because she said, how can you replace, Africa? So I've given you some hints on how you can do it. You can abstract, science is about explaining, for example. But what is the meaning of explaining something? Is to say what something means. So don't define Africa, say what it means. So it means the black race or the black people. It means oppression. It means self-determination. It means, you got so many options. Right? So in that way, you can transcend, right? The concept, and then you can tell people precisely what you mean when you use that concept. What is the meaning you want people to bear in mind when you use that concept? Because if we stay at the level of saying Africa, we will all be thinking that we are talking about the same thing, and we are not. There are many words here. Corruption. We all use the word corruption here, and we think we are talking about the same thing. We are not. We use the word Pan-Africanism, and we think we are talking about the same thing. We are not. And so many more concepts. Development. So that's what I'm talking about. So you don't be don't be afraid to be wrong. You shouldn't do that. Saint Augustine once said, if I err, if I make a mistake, I exist. So that was before Descartes, who said, I think, therefore I am. Right? So, your existence depends actually on making mistakes. Don't make too many, but on making mistakes. Right? So, yeah.
Alors, je comprends que nous pouvons trouver des mots, des terminologies qui définissent mieux notre représentation et qui peut ne pas du tout être ce que les autres pensent et autres. Ah, là, je comprends mieux. Parce que des quatre coins du monde, lorsqu'on dit l'Afrique, au moins tout le monde sait de quoi il s'agit. Mais lorsque nous rentrons dans les définitions, les explications, ce que nous y mettons, ça peut être juste lié à notre représentation, à notre vécu, à des réalités, disons, qui définissent peut-être d'où nous venons. Donc là, ça peut aller. Et puis bon, on peut trouver des terminologies pour remplacer et autres. Parce que quand on parle de l'Afrique, si dans mon pays, tout le monde est corrompu, si dans mon pays, il n'y a que des crises, des conflits et autres, c'est avec ces représentations-là, avec cette réalité-là que je me représente l'Afrique, puisque je ne suis jamais allée au Malawi, en Gambie, pour savoir ce qui se passe là-bas, à part Google et autres, ou nos lectures, ou la télévision. Donc, nous ne pouvons définir ou expliquer l'Afrique qu'en fonction de nos réalités, notre vécu, disons, notre perspective, et voilà. OK, ça peut aller.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Merci. Je pense aussi si nous définissons l'Afrique en fonction de notre vécu, de nos réalités, on va se limiter. Parce que là j'ai la région en fait. Elle a dit Bantou. Moi, je suis de l'Afrique centrale. Quand on va dire Bantou, on voit un peu cette limitation. Quand on va dire Peul, quand on va en Afrique de l'Est, on va dire tous ces Swahili, toutes d'autres populations. Et aussi, moi j'ai eu un ami, quelque part, quand je lui ai dit j'étais africain, il me dit la capitale de l'Afrique, c'est quoi? Parce que pour lui, l'Afrique, c'était un pays, c'était pas un continent.
Seigneur Jésus.
Ça n'a jamais été un continent. Pour lui, c'était un pays. Là, moi, je pense, à mon avis, c'est comme un exercice. Je ne sais pas si vous connaissez des 9 points où il faut relier avec 4 traits sans soulever le stylo. Je pense l'idée, c'était de lever les biais dans nos têtes, de nous dire, allez-y au-delà de vos réflexions, allez-y au-delà, pensez, n'ayez pas de limites et dites tout ce que vous dites. Dites tout ce que vous voulez, mais restez un peu cohérent. C'est vraiment ce que je pense.
Thank you for that. I think that's the point, really. That's the point. But again, what this means is that when you sit down together to think about that, of course, you want to communicate something. So, in the process of reflecting on what you want to communicate, you have to have an idea of Africa. You need to discuss that idea of Africa. What does Africa mean to you? You need to have an idea of civilization. What, does civilization mean to you in relation to Africa, to your idea of Africa? Right? So what he's just said, actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. There is this idea of strong objectivity, which especially in feminist scholarship is quite it's quite dominant as an epistemological perspective. So they oppose strong objectivity to weak objectivity, and what they mean by that is that strong objectivity is being sensitive to a plurality of perspectives on something, right? Because you may think that, take something like, a statement like women like domestic chores. Take a statement like that, and it's a statement that people made for years on end, right? And it was taken for granted, except that, the people who produced that statement were basically men, right? And they dominated public discourse. And so it was taken for granted that that statement is actually a revelation of human nature, right? So it took feminist scholars to come and say, no, there are patriarchal structures that lead women to actually appear as though they prefer that to other things, right? So on the one hand, you have weak objectivity, that is an approach to knowledge that is informed by a single perspective, and on the other hand, you have strong objectivity, that is an approach to phenomena that is informed by the plurality of views, right? So that's what we want. We cannot escape that. And if you are a group, yes, you have to discuss that notion of Africa until perhaps you find a common measure, or maybe you will fail to find a common measure. And it's no problem, right? If you look at I mean, of course, there's a dominant view of Africa, and I think Pan-Africanism has been, has played a fundamental role in fostering this idea of a common African faith, and so on, right? But that does not mean that there have not been other ways of looking at Africa. The controversies that we have even today, whether North Africa is part of Africa, whether it should be included in that idea of Africa. We have that. Uh, the South Africans among you, you have the notion of Makwerekwere, right? So we have all of this, but it shows, again, what we were talking about yesterday, that concepts are not innocent. They're not innocent. Okay. Oh, what a start. So I don't know how I should ask this question now. Is anybody willing to to have another go? Yeah.
So this is just a personal reflection based on what we spoke about yesterday. So I wrote, we discussed the interconnectedness of life and the interrelations among our lives, histories, and conditions that are too often singularized. So narratives singularized and produced in ways that do not offer understanding, but rather perpetuate a pattern of conception and form of conceptualizations that were set in motion a few hundred years ago to justify subjugation and oppression of our people. So we discussed the conceptions of who we are and how we live and how they are not articulated. That means how they are not reflective of our realities. On the same note, through the concepts we chose that I will not mention due to the assignment, we discussed that we have the language and the concepts that attempt to express our realities. And although we need to develop them, they are there in practice as well as in theory. That's my goal.
Thank you. That was very fast. And so it was a bit difficult for me to note down, but you used a lot of concepts. Okay, so which concept was it that you were not supposed to use?
Well, all the representation, spirituality, Ubuntu.
Okay, can you say that again, please? Slowly.
Okay, no, it's fine. So I just said we discussed the interconnectedness of life and the interrelations of amongst our lives and our histories and our conditions. And so that is in a nutshell what we talked about. And we talked about how those things are not expressed and are not articulated, but rather they are conceptualized in ways and a pattern of conceptualization that was set in motion a few hundred years ago.
Very good. I mean, the danger here is that you speak and you are not understood, right? So yes, I like the way you did it. Yeah, but if I said to you, okay, say the same thing again, but like you are at the marketplace here, you're saying that to someone at the marketplace at Sandaga Market. How would you say that?
I wouldn't change much because I think it's not difficult to understand that all our lives are interconnected and intertwined, and that basically, but those interconnections are not expressed in academia in ways that justify the reality of life.
Okay, I give
But
up.
I would also push on your question to maybe someone else who might have understood me.
Yeah, that's a good one. Has anyone understood this? Yes.
Moi, j'ai une autre préoccupation concernant cet exercice. Pour moi, parler de l'Afrique d'un point de vue commun pourrait nous pousser à... serait difficile pour nous d'être neutres parce qu'il y aurait toujours tendance à la subjectivité. Et je ne sais pas comment est-ce qu'on peut transcender le mot Afrique, le mot civilisation, bref, et contourner ces mots-là, les transcender, sans toutefois être subjectif. Pour moi, c'est difficile. Il y aurait toujours un penchant à vanter l'Afrique, à toujours prendre parti.
But that's precisely the point. That's what we are saying. That I mean, I don't think that not being neutral is a problem. You know, neutrality. I'm really not concerned about neutrality, so long as you are transparent about it. Yeah. So neutrality is not a problem, and subjectivity is not a problem either. Yeah, but you have to put it on the table, because even if you hide it, it's lurking beneath. It's there, and it informs what you are saying. Mhm. So I think this is what Godwin was saying yesterday. You know, we have been trained to, you know, to avoid that. Yeah. Uh, Neglecting the fact that those who are training us to avoid that are not avoiding it themselves. Right? Because we speak from a place. Now, for me, the question is a different one. Um, on which basis can we validate knowledge claims, taking into account the fact that they may be subjective? You know, because if there is no way we can validate those claims beyond subjectivity, then we do have a problem. You know, but we have to put our cards on the table. Yeah. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, c'est vrai que l'exercice était intéressant de trouver des concepts de substitution pour ne pas utiliser le mot Afrique. J'ai noté beaucoup de concepts, oppression, colonisation, corruption, guerre, lutte, conquête, colonisation. Mais la difficulté à ce niveau, c'est finalement de se dire, mais est-ce que l'Afrique a le monopole de la corruption, de l'autodétermination, de la lutte, de l'oppression? Est-ce que tous ces concepts-là, toutes ces réalités-là, est-ce qu'on les retrouve uniquement en Afrique? Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas également d'autres espaces géographiques où ces concepts sont également tout à fait opérants? Donc, c'est ma difficulté en fait.
I think that's the challenge. Right. Let me give you an example. The civil rights movement in the US. You know, what did Martin Luther King do? You know, what he did was to say to the Americans, we are American. So he expanded the concept of American, being American. He said, we are American. And therefore, you cannot treat us the way you are treating us. You see, he expanded. You know, he expanded. The struggle for self-determination in Africa, it operated on a conceptual level. You know, we said, or our forefathers and mothers, they said to the colonial authorities, you know, they said, we are human. So they expanded the notion of humanity. And as humans, we have a right to self-determination. You know, they expanded that. You cannot, you know, just as it is claimed, for example, that Immanuel Kant, I think you were talking about that yesterday, you know, that he introduced this idea of race in a particular way, which then enabled people to justify slavery, for example. Yeah. And so, in order to overcome the limitations of the concept of race as it was proposed by Immanuel Kant, you know, you had either to show that it is highly problematic, right? Or, you know, that it should have much more than simply, I don't know, those categories that have to do with intellectual ability, physical prowess, and so on. That on that basis, you cannot make relevant distinctions among human beings. Again, you've expanded it. You have transcended it. Right? So this is, but you know, this is intellectual work. This is what we're supposed to do as intellectuals. Remember yesterday I said our main tool is the concept. We have to learn to work with the concept. Yeah.
Well, I guess for me it's a question now on, because in for example in South Africa, the definition of being an African, now of course you say like in South Africa we also have white people, and Thabo Mbeki did this speech, I'm an African, if you know the values of Africa and all of those things, what it means to be an African. And but now and then being an African in South Africa then incorporated also white people. And then now we talk about power and knowledge, and these people have been, they are in a power position in this definition. And then now they become part of this definition, what it means to be an African, and then the power dynamics in that, and then you get at the bottom as a Black person in what it means to be an African, because someone else also is now, so how then you deal with those things, in the way you are saying we must in a position of being a non-being, a human being is being a non-being, because therefore in South Africa, Black people, we can argue they still not human, they still in the positionality of non-being. And then you have these people who've been being, or maybe even transcended being, and now they become African again. So then what do we do with how do we deal with that?
No, I think that's a good question. And there are basically two answers to that question. The first answer is that we as academics are not going to settle, issues that are political in nature, right? I see my role as consisting of looking at all the kinds of understandings that there exist of what it is to be an African, right? And how these come, how these interconnect, to use your expression. Yeah, how they interconnect and what results from that. That's my job, to describe that, right? And I have no business saying this is the correct way of understanding Africa, right? All I can say is these are the ways in which people understand Africa, and this is what happens when those understandings come into contact with one another. So that's the first answer. Now, the second answer, which is for me much more important, is that for us to be able to describe things, we need concepts. And for us to be able to use concepts, we need to define them. Because the way we define concepts is relevant to how we see the things that we think we see, how we see all the relationships that those things in. Yeah. So when I say my definition of Africa, for example, I say my definition of Africa is one that's based on complexion, on race, on color of skin. Yeah. So I'm not saying I accept that, I'm simply saying, okay, this is my definition of it. And so based on that, all the things that I will see will somehow be related to the importance that skin color has to how I approach things. And that's subjective, like she was saying. Yeah, but it is transparent. And so the role of other academics is to take me up on that and show me perhaps the limitations of restricting the notion of Africa to skin color. Show me that using Africa in that way, I will not go far enough in accounting for the things that I want to account for, or telling me, oh wow, this is really the best way to do this. Now I understand this, I understand that, and so on. Is it that's intellectual work? That's how we work.
I want to ask a follow-up question. So is it declaring positionality? Because when I said what I said about trying to define Ubuntu through Bantu, it's because in South Africa, Ubuntu is so polarized that it is, Ndumiso Tata will say, it is defined outside of the culture and the language in which it comes from. So it has become an abstract notion that doesn't belong to anyone. Everyone can define it. And then the people whose concept it belongs to, they are aliens into articulating. So therefore, for me, say using Bantu languages and Bantu culture brought back the concept, not just as a modern concept, but also as a very old concept that cuts across time and space.
So yeah, that is it. What you are doing is specifying your understanding of Africa, and also signaling to other people the potential and the limitations of that understanding, and so people will take you up on that. So you see, remember yesterday I also said, well, yesterday I said a lot of things. So one of the things I said yesterday was that one of the goals of science is not to say what truth is, but it is to say the conditions under which something can be held to be true. You know, so you will limit the scope of what you are saying by saying, look, my understanding of Africa is limited to Bantu and so on. But you see, you said that in a pan-African context, so people would be right in saying to you, look, Bantu is a gross limitation of the notion of Africa, because not all Africans are Bantu. And then, you know, it's okay. Okay, there, and then here, and then there.
En fait, ce matin, vous avez repris votre propos d'hier. C'est-à-dire que excusez-moi, les concepts ne sont guère innocents. Est-ce que là, vous ne rejoignez pas Descartes qui dit que ce qui fait que nous ne nous comprenons pas, c'est que nous ne nous comprenons pas dans le sens qu'on donne aux mots. Par exemple, nous, en philosophie, on fait souvent un travail d'élucidation des concepts. Mais ce travail d'élucidation des concepts, c'était dans le but de nous hisser vers, entre guillemets, ce qui paraît universel. Je donne un exemple. Vous avez même cité Kant. En parlant de la notion de race, par exemple, il n'est pas dit, bon, il y en a qui postulent l'idée selon laquelle ce n'est pas parce qu'il y a une classification des êtres humains en race qu'on est forcément raciste. Quelqu'un comme Raphaël Lager, dans les races humaines selon Kant, vous direz, autant pour moi, que Kant n'est pas raciste, il a juste fait une classification scientifique. Alors que moi, dans mon travail de thèse, je montre que cette classification des races, des êtres humains en 4 races est un travail purement raciste, car disons, il y a des critères qui sont là-bas comme hiérarchisation, essentialisation, entre autres. Donc, est-ce que le but de cet exercice-là qu'on est en train de faire n'est pas une sorte de traque des concepts pour avoir, d'ici la fin de la semaine, un ensemble d'éléments qui nous permettraient après de parler de l'Afrique et d'être beaucoup plus, comment dirais-je, concis? Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I think that's really a great statement. I think it's part of the job that we are doing here. You see, I want to insist on this point. Our main tool in intellectual life is the concept. You know, such that, you know, we could even say we are in the business of manipulating concepts. You know, we're in that business of manipulating concepts. And so it's very important to to be aware of the importance of working with concepts and with all the pitfalls. And what you've just said, your argument against Kant, makes a lot of sense to me. And of course, I know I have read that, Kant himself then abandoned that idea. He realized when he saw the implications of that, and then he came to revise his views. But you see, we use concepts, and the concepts that we use, uh, they move into everyday life, right? And they are picked up by people, by politicians, by ordinary people, and people give them their own meanings, right? And so it's our job as intellectuals, because we work with concepts, to pick them up and say, this is the precise meaning we want to give to this, so that it can do this job. But in doing that, we are opening up possibilities, because people will see, oh, there's something I hadn't seen before, but now because of this precision here, now I see it. So maybe you have to open it up. Remember Kwasi Wiredu from yesterday, when he said, for you to be able to understand, you have to reach the limit, of your concept. If you cannot go to where your concept cannot help you understand something, you haven't understood yet. So that's the idea, right? So I think that's a good way. I mean, of course, there's more to that than what I am saying now, and I will discuss some of these things later on. But I have a problem with some of the ways in which we react to the representation of Africa, right? That is, we tend, maybe this is a sweeping statement, but we tend, I don't think we are critical enough. We are not even critical enough of the sources of our own critique. I think a lot of the sources of our critique are precisely the things that we want to free ourselves from, and we don't realize that. And then we move to simply an ideological critique of things, which is okay, right? But I think it's limiting. There's much more that we can do than simply, saying people are racist, people are this, are despicable, and so on. There's much more that we can do, and we should do that. So I'm hoping that by the end of the week, you will have acquired. I mean, not acquired, but you'll have become more sensitive to the importance of doing real conceptual work. So then,
Yeah, I wanted to add up to the point you made earlier on about Martin Luther King expanding the meaning of America. It makes me recall a publication by a Nigerian gender scholar. I think her name is Oyoronke Oyoromi. Yeah, one of her works, she found out that the English concept of male and female was not adequate to describe how a Yoruba understood the sexes. So she coined another name called an anatomical female and anatomical male, which she shortened to be Anna male and Anna female, to grasp the concept of how a Yoruba would understand the two sexes. So this is something that also relates to me from my culture of having to see the sexes as just the biological, but not anything else associated with them. So I think pushing us to expand our concepts is very much a good exercise that you have to learn to do. Thank you.
thank you for that. I mean, that's a great example. So, because that's precisely what she did. Oyomi, that's precisely what she did. She picked up the concept of gender and she said it is informed by biology. Now, in my culture, it's not like that. You know, so she says that the relevant approach to these things is age. You know, so that's age is the relevant social category, not biology, you know, in that sense, right? And so she now came up with an understanding of gender that will expand our knowledge of these issues. That's it. I mean, not just her, Ife Amadiomi as well. You know, when she wrote about male daughters and female sons, right? She also did that. She made that contribution to you know, expanding our understanding of you know, gender, right? Of so this is it. This is it. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Please, I won't be giving uh, a single summary of all our concepts because we're not working on the same research topic. So some of us are working on media advertising, female political participation, plastic recycling, deconstructing psychology. So for Ivan, who is working on advertising, his major concepts, the best concept that describes his work is black or being black. He's interested in understanding how the concept is used to market or project white articles or natural properties such as hair, or demarket things pertaining to blacks or being black. For example, he cited how a black woman's hair is described as kinky, which to him is derogatory and dismissive, and a white woman's hair is described as flat and smooth in promotional project depiction. This for him defines the truth that people see in media advertising and impacts on their preferences. His own content, however, lies in Black Lives Matter. His rules are not necessarily embedded in methodology, but in using Black scholarship to study Black issues in advertising and brand communication. For Molonesh, her major concepts are gender equality and democracy. She believes that women are underrepresented in Ethiopian politics. The most important to her is the perception that equal participation of women in Ethiopian politics is merely utopian, theoretical, and exploited for political manipulation and correctness. Real impact is lacking or deliberately displaced. That is to say, the impact of political equality is really not lacking. It's merely a construct that is just hanging there. These facts also represent her truths and should be gathering data from adult females with requisite experiences. However, one of us rightly advised her to incorporate stories of older native women on their own terms in order to grab the core of their thoughts about women's political participation, as well as the ideas fueling the utopian depiction of equality in political participation in Ethiopia. Her rules are embedded in qualitative inquiry. For Florence, the major concepts driving her work are plastic pollution, photodegradation, and toxic waste. Her work is founded on the interest that plastics do not biodegrade like organic waste, but rather photodegrade over time and remain in the environment, posing nuisance to animals, humans, both locally and internationally. The content of our work is that the activities of people contribute to plastic pollution, and the same, if shaped appropriately, would trace. For rules, she is imbibing the qualitative methodology and would conduct data collection via purposive sampling. Her samples would also be drawn from the ideas supplied by the ecological modernization theory, which involves participants at various levels in the society, from the household, corporate recycling companies, government and non-governmental organizations. Then for Melusi, he's a psychologist. His major research concept is his story. He believes that whatever has been told or done about psychology was handed down and is alien to his own personal experiences of the experiences of the local. So the context of his study lies within the idea that South African inquiry of psychology is alien and handed down by foreign ideals. His content lies in deconstructing these alien ideas, which have applied to him over the years, and reconstructing them using the narratives of local ethnic groups. He can as well expand on this if he wishes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now you caught me by surprise because I thought you wanted still to contribute to that discussion we were having. I didn't know that you were presenting your own thing, which is good because yesterday your group hadn't really presented the stuff. So now the exercise would be to remove all those concepts. To remove all those concepts, you know, but that's good. That's very good. Right. Um, I think we are fine, aren't we? We don't need to belabor the point. It's an invitation to you to abstract, and by doing that, to expand the scope of your tool. You know, explore all the things that you can do with your tool. That and of course to be aware of the things that you cannot do, you know, with your tool, of the limitations of your tool, right? Because that also is an indication of your ignorance, you know, of our ignorance, right? Because concepts can also make us ignorant of things, right? Because they point us to certain things and we neglect other things, right? So this work that we do with concepts is very, very important. Yeah. Okay. Now here's a suggestion. I think, you know, there's another elegant way you could have chosen to summarize your work without using um, without using the key concepts. You could have used proverbs. You could have used proverbs. Yeah, proverbs. I mean, proverbs are such a rich resource, and we don't explore it enough. Proverbs. You know, proverbs are theories. Proverbs are theories. They help us um, shape facts. They help us put facts into context. You know, so there are ways of looking at the world and making sense of the world. Right? So, you know, and I mean, as Africans, we should use that resource. It's out there. You know, I made a list of proverbs uh, in the hope that I could be able to translate some of the things that I would hear here using those proverbs. So, for example, when that group was talking about yesterday, was talking about what I understood to be crisis and you know, recomposition, reconstitution, and so on. Uh, you know, I thought maybe one good proverb to translate that could have been something like, "However far a stream flows, it doesn't forget its origin." And now that opens up new possibilities to look at this moment of crisis. So for example, the question about whether we really have to go back to our origins, what is our relationship to the origins, all of that. You open up possibilities. So there were people who were concerned, for example, with issues of identity. So there's one proverb I found: if you want to know the end, look at the beginning. Like that. This, when we say there is wisdom in our culture, this is it. That's the wisdom we live with every day and we ignore. Yeah. Yes.
So you mean using these proverbs just within the context of this summer school?
No, within the context of the exercise of summarizing your findings, for example, take your own work.
My research work.
Yeah, and then, for example, instead of summarizing it to me using your key concepts, maybe you can find a proverb that captures the essence of what you are doing.
Okay, right in the summer school, right?
No, in general.
Okay, but I'm asking this because in my school, we are you're expected to abide by certain rules of language, speak scientific language. Yes, that's why I'm asking. Is it just for the purposes of this summer school?
Look, what we are trying to do here is to is to give ourselves more resources to do intellectual work, and we should not be limited by formalities, right? Of course, when you write your thesis, you have to respect those formalities. But what I am saying is that there are so many more resources out there which we are not tapping on, and we should. So, has any of you ever thought of using proverbs? Okay.
I have, but I'm still at the very initial stages of my research work, so like still thinking them through. Yeah, but I have a book of proverbs in my language that I'm going to study and use.
How about storytelling?
Storytelling, because that's what we do. We tell stories. We're telling stories. Yeah.
For me, I used mythologies, like African myths, and like I think now the last, like you were describing, I got to understand what you were. I'm like, okay, because you said we should not use spirituality, and I thought of Bibi Bagare Yusuf, of his response to Oyoronke, that also, because Oyoronke's argument is that Africans don't organize society through gender, but seniority. And then the response, Bibi, was like, well, we can take it further than that. I agree with you. Africans don't organize society through gender, but we can take it further and use the concept of polytheism. That Africans have these gods, understanding of many gods that helps us to absorb and describe things, and it's an open, like the river you made. It branches all over the place.
Thank you, Prof.
My comment is more a concern on my sister there, more than anything, because you said something which is a bit troubling for me, and I think even yesterday you did touch on it, and I'm quite concerned because if you leave the summer school without having to comprehend or to understand that you cannot be removed from the dynamics that I think Prof has been trying to speak to since yesterday, then we will be in trouble as Africans, So I'm concerned that you said you could only try to do this in the summer school, thus removing your own reality to where you'll be going back to your school from the concepts that we are trying to learn from here, where you say you will be having to use what you indicated as professional language. And I think if you try to recall from yesterday, this is what we've been trying to problematize from the start, So if you keep that in mind, then you'll be able to actually affect your own dissertation and your own work on a high level. I understand that there are some standards and some ideas that are put forward in your school, and these ideas, they try to say you must reach these standards, but that is what you need to start to problematize from the start, because if you do not do that, what happens is that you will just be wasting your time, when you try to rethink and deconstruct what it is that you do, because you said, I think you're in media. Is it media? Communication? What is it? Sociology is worse because you cannot remove it from what we do here, so sociology is intertwined within society itself. We cannot function without sociology, as a branch. So you cannot remove the ideas that I think we are trying to learn here from the actual work that you'll be doing at school. If anything, this should be influencing everything that we do when we leave this space. Do I make sense? Okay.
Sorry, let me react a bit. Maybe you got me wrong. Yeah. Of course, I came here to improve myself so I can improve on my work. I'm just concerned because there are technical languages in each discipline. For example, I make a proverb, my supervisor would see it and circle it. What is this? So I just want to understand, you know, maybe while applying for something, you can, I'm just asking, maybe you can use this other words and express yourself freely, provided you are intellectual enough. But within your project, I'm just thinking that maybe certain standards are required. That's all.
So we're not break. So I've got two people, you and then Jai, and then we should go to the break.
D'accord, merci. Hier, ma sœur de l'Ouganda, Clara, a soulevé une préoccupation à laquelle nous n'avons pas répondu avant de partir. Et je me retrouve parfaitement dans les préoccupations de Florence. Lorsque moi j'ai postulé à l'école d'été, je m'attendais à tout ce que nous faisons depuis hier, mais cela ne m'empêche pas de garder aussi à l'esprit le but. Moi, je viens du Bénin où, lorsque tu choisis un thème de thèse, déjà au niveau du thème, lorsque ça ne rencontre pas l'assentiment du directeur de thèse, tu ne bouges pas. Moi, ça fait la 3e fois que je change de thème. Et je tourne en rond depuis. J'ai mes amis qui ont soutenu depuis, ceux qui ont voulu se ranger, faire ce que veut le directeur de thèse, trouver un thème qui cadre avec ses ambitions futures, ont soutenu depuis 3 ans. Moi, j'ai fait mon DEA, mon master de recherche, ça fait bientôt 8 ans. Mais je n'ai pas bougé parce que je suis restée collée à ce que je veux faire moi-même, ce dans quoi je voudrais pouvoir me spécialiser demain. Je ne fasse pas forcément référence à mon directeur de thèse par rapport à ça. Mais je n'ai pas bougé. je suis, disons, un tout petit peu étiquetée dans mon département comme la rebelle, celle qui ne veut pas rester dans les carcans dans lesquels on la place pour avancer. Donc, ceux et celles avec qui j'ai fait le DEA ont été déjà recrutés à l'université après leur thèse. Et quand ils me rencontrent, ils disent, Doris, bon, franchement, tu es en train de foutre ton avenir en l'air parce qu'on t'a juste dit, prends ce thème-là. Mais si je prends un thème qui m'est imposé, qu'est-ce que je deviens? Qu'est-ce que je fais avec ça pour véritablement me démarquer de ce qu'ont fait nos directeurs qui ont eu, eux, à leur époque, le temps de choisir des thématiques dans lesquelles ils se sont sentis à l'aise. Donc, et le problème revient lorsque tu identifies tu fais des hypothèses, on te dit, il faut revenir à telle chose. Donc, moi, j'ai bien envie qu'on applique tout ça, mais que faisons-nous pour qu'au sortir de cette école d'été, nous puissions poursuivre nos recherches en respectant bien les canons définis ou les canons qui ont toujours existé, en conceptualisant nos terminologies, les éléments sur lesquels nous voulons travailler, mais de sorte à quand même finir notre travail et rester et ne pas être, bon, ceux et celles qui veulent réinventer la roue. Et sa question hier, sommes-nous en danger? Allons-nous vers le danger? Allons-nous nous retrouver demain dans un contexte où on va nous catégoriser, nous particulariser sans que nous ne puissions avancer? Franchement, ça me taraude aussi l'esprit. Donc, sa préoccupation, je trouve qu'elle est légitime. Nous n'allons pas inventer la roue, quelle que soit notre volonté de changer les choses, de voir les choses autrement, de conceptualiser nos données. Parce que nous sommes jeunes, nous avons besoin de ressources pour avancer. Donc, que faisons-nous dans cet imbroglio? Merci.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tout le monde. En fait, moi, je voulais juste intervenir par rapport à ce qu'on a dit depuis ce matin, par rapport au travail de déconstruction, parce que c'est de cela qu'il s'agit. Et donc, quand on parlait tout à l'heure des proverbes et puis de citations, entre autres, quelqu'un a parlé de contes aussi, ça m'a fait un peu penser aussi au langage, aux symboles en fait en Afrique, parce qu'il s'agit de cela. Quand il m'est arrivé de travailler, et je suis encore sur le genre en fait en Afrique, et particulièrement dans l'ethnie Peul, Pulaar en général, j'ai eu des réticences par rapport à ce que je rencontrais, les personnes que je rencontrais en parlant de genre, en fait. Et à chaque fois qu'il était question de genre, ils me disaient non, il ne s'agit pas de la femme et de l'homme, cela dépasse cette question-là. On veut nous ramener ailleurs, on veut nous amener des concepts, en fait, qui nous viennent de l'étranger et qui prônent une certaine ouverture, en fait, à l'homosexualité, etc., alors qu'on n'est pas dedans. Bon, ceci dit, j'ai essayé de trouver en fait une façon de me faire comprendre quand j'étais sur le terrain. Et avec la culture Peul, j'ai eu à savoir que par exemple, quand il parle de Jom Sudo, c'est le propriétaire en fait de la chambre, c'est-à-dire la femme. Jom Gale, c'est le propriétaire de la maison. En discutant avec les hommes et les femmes, et surtout les plus âgés, ils me disent, mais en fait, il faut voir que au final, la décision n'est pas prise par le propriétaire de la maison, mais plutôt par la propriétaire de la chambre, puisque les décisions sont prises dans la chambre. Et donc, à partir de cette conception-là du genre, et surtout de cette conception de l'aspect dominant des inégalités, ils me disent, en fait, il n'y a pas d'inégalité. C'est juste une séparation pour montrer que chacun a sa façon de faire, mais en fait, ensemble, il y a une décision qui est prise. Et qu'au sortir, devant les gens, ce n'est pas à la femme de prendre la parole, mais c'est à l'homme de faire bonne figure, en fait. Voilà, de faire genre, prendre la parole. Et c'est comme ça qu'ils se sont constitués. Et donc, on part d'une réalité, on part de symboles pour en venir, en fait, à des concepts qu'on va plus ou moins manier. Propriétaire de la chambre, propriétaire de la maison, qui viennent qui vient de la langue poulard, mais de la langue poulard qu'on essaie de traduire en Wolof et puis de ramener en fait à l'aspect genre, aux études de genre. Et du coup, je me dis qu'il y a un danger par rapport un peu à ce qu'elle disait un peu, mais en fait, le danger n'est pas aussi grand si on se met dans la tête qu'il y a un travail qu'il y a un travail de contextualisation à faire. Et conceptualisation, qui prend la parole, qui décrit, qui est le sociologue en fait, qui fait le travail de chercheur. C'est le regard du chercheur qui est important. Et le regard du chercheur, en fait, on doit nous-mêmes le percevoir à partir de là où on est et de qui on est, puisque c'est ce qui est plus important. Et du coup, en fait, à partir de ce moment, on peut échapper à cette peur-là et nous dire, en fait, que finalement, on n'invente rien, mais en fait, il y a tout à faire en fait à partir de cette Afrique-là. Il y a tout à faire à partir de ce qu'on veut faire, à partir du travail et de notre œil de chercheur que nous avons, mais œil de chercheur africain. Pas à rester en Afrique, mais à aller à exporter ailleurs, à partager avec d'autres, puisque en fait, on parlait de réfutabilité, de vérificabilité, et justement, c'est le sens de la science, des discussions, des échanges. Et justement, c'est ce qu'on fait ici depuis hier. Et je voulais partager cela avec vous, vous dire en fait que justement, cette école-là, l'importance, c'est de ne pas en fait se dire qu'on va tout recréer, mais de se dire en fait qu'il y a un mot, qu'il y a des choses à dire, qu'il y a des choses à partager. Voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so I know there are many more people who would like to speak, but that's why we also have coffee breaks, so that you can talk to. Yeah. So let's go to our coffee break, and we will start at 11:15. Right. So we start at 11:15.
Après les ateliers de la pensée de Dakar, j'ai eu et là, j'essaie de m'inspirer de la cosmologie, complexe italienne et puisqu'il y a un aspect oui, surtout toi, en plus, avec ce que tu fais, tu peux bien le permettre. Oui, justement, je pense que c'est vrai. Est-ce que non, mais quand tu auras soutenu ta thèse, on va te dire encore non, tu n'as pas encore le niveau. Moi, je sais que j'ai eu ce problème-là, c'était sur les politiques publiques. Et on restait dans ce qui était top-down ou bottom-up. Et après, je leur ai dit, moi, la façon dont je voyais les choses. Et sur le terrain, c'était pas du tout bottom-up, quoi. C'était plus ou moins across. C'est-à-dire que tout le monde y avait droit, finalement. Et chacun disait ce qu'il avait envie. Les politiques publiques, ce n'est pas du bas vers le haut ou du haut vers le bas, ce n'est pas une évidence. Ça peut aussi venir de manière latérale. Les raisons pour lesquelles aujourd'hui on a de plus en plus d'acteurs dans les politiques. Mais c'était ma vision. J'ai eu énormément de critiques de masculinisme par rapport à ça, au fait que c'était très mince, au fait que... Mais après, qu'est-ce qu'on veut? Un travail de thèse, en fait, c'est quelque chose de très personnel, c'est comme un enfant. Et à partir du moment où c'est notre enfant, c'est à nous de savoir comment l'élever.
Oh, no, no, but just to approach it. We can put it somewhere. Yeah. No, 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 never me, never me. Yeah, I never make it.
On se dit oui, je suis avec toi. On va pas te traiter et cela ne va pas faire de toi. Cela ne va pas te faire de ta thèse une thèse qui n'est pas défendante défendable. Si on t'autorise à la soutenir, ça veut dire qu'elle est défendable. Si on t'autorise à vraiment à la soutenir, ça veut dire qu'elle est défendable. Par rapport au terrain que tu as fait, par rapport à tes données secondaires, l'essentiel, c'est ça. Si on ne t'autorise pas à soutenir, oui. Mais au moment où on t'autorise à soutenir, il n'y a pas de problème. Après, le jour de la soutenance, plus tu es fatigué. Moi, je sais que ma soutenance a duré 6 heures de temps. Mais par contre, je sais une chose, de par l'expérience maintenant, plus ça dure, plus parce que j'ai eu à assister à des soutenances qui ont duré 2h30, 3 heures, on a évalué la personne. Et pour nous qui sommes dans le système francophone,
Okay, so welcome back. And we are going to continue. Thank you for the discussion before the break. I think it was also enlightening. Some questions will always in the nature of intellectual work, and the challenge is always to take up those questions and see what you can do with them. Perhaps one point I would like to make at the outset is that the idea of a summer school is something that has to do with promoting creativity, innovative ways of addressing things. So it goes beyond normal university life. It's much more than that. So some of the things that we're going to do here are not going to be consistent with the ways in which we work at university, because the idea is precisely to go beyond that. It's to break new ground, and a summer school offers us that framework, and that's how we should approach it. But we should always be aware of the constraints under which we work at our home universities, and we have to respect those constraints and see, how we can achieve our goals within those constraints. That's a fact of life. But use this opportunity that you have here to think out of the box, as the saying goes. Use it. That's what you're here for. And see what you get from it, and see how the things that you will be learning from all the other people here, how those will help you improve your own work. That's all. So now I'm going to talk about objectivity. And in fact, we have been talking about objectivity all this time. But I want to give you a few, additional resources to do that. And I thought the best way to start would be to share this quote here. It's very difficult to read it because of the light conditions here in this room. But I will read it from here. I will read the English version. The French version is on the right-hand side. So this is a quote. This is someone who wrote in the 19th century. He wrote this, and he was writing about a German socialist called Lassalle. He was saying things about him. And what I would like to hear from you is, first of all, what you think about this quote, what you think about what the person is saying. But most of all, I want to ask you to share with us whether you think that someone who says something like this is a good person, is someone who can mean good to the rest of us, that kind of thing. So he says, The Jewish nigger, I'm quoting now, reading. The Jewish nigger LaSalle, who is fortunately living at the end of this week, has happily lost another 5,000 thalers, that's a currency, in a false speculation. It is now perfectly clear to me that he is descended from the niggers who joined Moses' train out of Egypt, as is also proved by his head formation and his hair growth. If his mother or grandmother from his father's side did not cross with a nigger. Now, this combination of Judaism and Teutonism with the Negro basic substance must produce a strange product. The fellow's importunity is also niggerish. Okay, I know it's heavy stuff. I'm sorry, I should have warned you. Yeah, but what do you think of this? What do you think of it?
I think the person is being sarcastic.
So this is sarcasm of of the worst sort. Okay, any other? Yes, please.
I think he's using the tools that he's learned in order to describe or understand someone.
So,
So I don't think it's bad or good. I just think that's what he's been taught. I think that's what he's learned, and whatever the limitations are, I don't know. I wouldn't say it was bad or good. I think those are the tools that he's been given to describe blackness or niggerism or whatever.
Okay. Yes. Condescending. Yes.
It's racist and disgusting.
Okay.
I agree, it is racist and disgusting. I also feel that the writer seems to be very angry at LaSalle and is calling him the worst thing that he can think of, which is the N-word.
I mean, bad.
Je pense qu'il confirme. Alors, je pense qu'il confirme des préjugés à partir d'un fait particulier. C'est-à-dire qu'il avait à l'avance des préjugés sur le nègre et il a fallu qu'un nègre agisse pour qu'il confirme cela et en fasse une vérité générale.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything?
I don't think the N-word can either be, in a certain context, can either be a bad thing or a good thing to someone. I think if you are taught that that's what that person is, then that's what they are. I don't think it can necessarily be classified as good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we have here the problem of context. So what's the context within which a word is deployed, right? And that context may indeed, make some people think, give it a negative or positive connotation. Yeah. Yes.
I think the author is talking about the inherent, I don't know what word to use, bad nature of the African, if I should say it that way. Like we are born with that nature.
Good. But what about, so I mean, of course, it's just a quote. You don't know the person. You don't, anything about him or her. But, is that a, kind of person you would expect good things from? Sorry. Had to laugh. Yeah, why?
I think that's an emotional reaction because you've made assumptions about who he is and what the word nigger means to him.
Yeah, we have Malawi defending racists.
Um, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to articulate how we need to apply context, like, and preconceived assumptions. Like, this is just, this kind of person is, it literally, as Vuyo said, it's disgusting and racist. And especially when when you bring your own experience to it. So, like, this need to, you know want to sanitize it, or want to think it through or make it sensible, I'm just struggling with. um if you speak about this and speak like this of a person, I don't. There's no way that I think that you're going to be a good person. In no way. And I don't believe that. Yeah, no. Uh-uh. Uh-uh. No, it's not. No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. There.
Okay, thank you. Looking at it, I honestly looked at the context at which the man is coming from. Uh, first of all, he seems not to be in a pleasant mood or happy with the man in question he is addressing to. One, but to me, I looked at the words, although we may take offensive of it, but self-realization. If someone tells me that I have this skin and that is my color, I need to be proud of it, because I see a sense of description of the hair, the color, and the pedigree at which he is coming from. So, to a normal sense, if you want to be level-headed to a point, you take it to be, that is my own identity, and thank you for recognizing my own identity.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. I mean, of course, you see, maybe one issue that you are overlooking is that he's actually using those traits as justification for why that person behaves in the way that he thinks. Yeah. So that's problematic. I would say. Yeah. Hmm. But it's again this issue of context, right? Yeah. Okay.
Merci beaucoup. Euh, je pense qu'il y a dans tout cela ce que nous appelons les préjugés. Et les préjugés, en réalité, ne relèvent de ce que nous appelons les normes sociales. Celui qui a peut-être décrit l'intéressé comme ça est lui aussi moulé peut-être dans un environnement où peut-être on lui a tout le temps rabattu les oreilles avec les mots qu'il utilise pour décrire l'intéressé. Donc, il n'est pas un produit du néant. Ce que je veux faire ressortir, c'est qu'il n'est pas un produit du néant. Donc, il dit tout ça en fonction de l'environnement qu'il a aussi produit. Donc, moi, je ne me demande pas est-ce que c'est une bonne personne ou c'est une mauvaise personne. Mais dans quel moule il a été vraiment façonné lui-même pour pouvoir trouver des mots aussi durs, aussi le mot m'échappe, aussi dénigrants, voilà, pour dire ce qu'il a dit. Donc, pour moi, le problème ne se situe pas au niveau de la personne décrite, mais de celui qui décrit.
Le mot dénigrant est aussi problématique. Mais, okay. Yes, I think you are raising an important issue here, which was also raised by you, and that is the issue of, people speaking the language of their time, right? So you cannot speak differently from the way people speak in your society and in your time, right? Now we can accept that or reject it, but I think it's a fact. Of course, the question could be here, are you sure, all of you, that all the things you say today, you will be able to say them in 50 or 100 or 150 years from now? Okay. Just a minute here.
Oui, merci encore une fois pour la parole m'accorder. Je crois que je vais juste compléter ce que Doris venait de dire, parce qu'évidemment, elle a abondé dans mon angle. Justement, la personne, il est un peu difficile de condamner les propos de cette personne qui s'est exprimée ainsi, parce que, en fait, tout ce qu'elle a dit au sujet de nègre, ça dépend de la manière dont elle a été socialisée. Parce que la manière de penser, la manière de faire, la manière d'écrire dépend du contexte dans lequel nous nous retrouvons, dépend de la manière dont nous avons été formés. Et c'est dans ce sens-là, c'est dans cette perspective qu'il faut situer cette citation-là. Mais il n'est pas question de condamner ou de juger. Et je pense aussi, comme venait de le dire, monsieur le professeur, évidemment, le langage évolue aussi en fonction du temps et des contextes aussi. C'est tout ce que je peux compléter par rapport au propos devant nous ici. Merci beaucoup.
Ok, merci. Ici, et après. Short statement.
Yeah, no, quickly. Mine is it's difficult to say if a person is bad or good, being bad and good is trying to dichotomize people and trying to look at humans in binary when in reality humans are more than that. For me, Gandhi is a racist who hated black South Africans, but for a number of people in their millions, he's a hero. So when you try to say a person having said this statement, if it comes from a subjective point of view, I make the argument that this person I cannot get along with. There's every chance that this person hates who I am, not because of the content of myself, but because of the phenotype of who I am. So it is very difficult to say if this person is good or bad, but the statement that he made is fundamentally racist and there's no in between. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ok, merci Stéphane. Ce que je voulais dire, ça rejoindra un peu ce que j'ai eu à aborder ce matin. Je pense que en chacun de nous sommeille, on va dire, un background théorique qui fait qu'on est amené à s'exprimer sur une situation selon le vécu qu'on a et l'interaction avec les autres également. Je ne pourrais pas juger des dits de ce monsieur, mais ce que j'aimerais bien savoir, c'est la nature de la personne qui parle. Est-ce un chercheur, un roi, un citoyen lambda de l'époque? Je me dis que si c'était un chercheur, j'aurais pu bien juger parce que là, il a manqué de ce qu'on appelle cette rupture. Il n'y a pas de rupture parce que ces propos peuvent paraître subjectifs, mais encore faut-il se remettre dans le contexte. Mais surtout ce background théorique qui fait qu'on est à même à avoir un jugement qui ne soit pas autant objectif qu'il soit. Donc c'est juste ce que je voulais ajouter. Merci.
Okay, we take three more here and then there and then there.
In reference to what you said about words changing, there was just, it's not necessarily related to this, but there was a time we could say retard and not, it would be fine. It was acceptable. There was a time we could say cripple and it was acceptable. There was a time we could say disabled and that was acceptable. Now we say differently abled. Now we say living with disability. So things change over time. How people want to be represented changes over time. So I think it's dynamic.
Professor, what I think is that we're trying to understand something that's ununderstandable. We're trying to explain something that's just simply unexplainable. We can only judge the statement from this positionality. Gandhi being hateful towards Black South Africans, I can only judge him as a Black South African. I don't have another body to judge him upon, right? I can only understand somebody calling me a nigger or a kafir from this body that has been called nigger and kafir. I have nothing else to judge them upon, right? So if in 100 years from now, it turns out I've written something that at that particular point in time makes me Islamophobic, makes me tribalistic, they have every right to judge me based on their context at that time. So we are judging this human being based on this context at this time from this body and from nowhere else, right? So I am not understanding why we are trying to find context, and particularly because this person doesn't just use the word nigger, but literally ties it to the bad behavior or to whatever this person is doing, which necessarily means it is exactly racist, and there's no other way to understand it. If I'm also entertaining the fact that this person may also be Black, right? This person may not necessarily be white, may be a Black person with internalized racism, because we also can internalize racism and speak about each other in this way. But at the end of the day, it is still racist, disgusting, and I want to find him where in 1700 and shoot him to death.
Thank you. Personally, I can't find context in this statement. What I see is a prejudiced person. What I can see is someone who is prejudiced, filled with stereotypes against a certain person. So I'm asking myself, this person that said these things because he feels this person is a nigger, if this so-called nigger does something wonderful, would he also attribute it to niggerism? Would he also attribute it to the person being niggerish? Would he say, oh, this is how niggers are, they are intelligent? Why is it only in the negatives that is that? So I can't find context. What I can find is someone who is prejudiced, stereotyped, and doesn't hesitate to express it in the most cruel, sarcastic manner. That's what I see.
Thank you. I think there was over there. Yeah.
I think in trying to put this in context, we fall in the trap of moral relativism. Yes, and in some instances, what is wrong. I think I'll lean towards Kant's, concept of, the moral law. I mean, there are just certain things that are wrong. Their arguments have come up about the context in which he was socialized and stuff. As individuals and as adults, you have the responsibility to learn and unlearn certain things. You don't need some supreme power to tell you that, referring to somebody in this insultive way is wrong. You just don't. He just did not only refer to this individual, he referred to his mother and his grandmother in this very condescending manner. So it's just ununderstandable, and there's no need to try to sanitize it. It's racist and disgusting.
Okay, I wanted to close the discussion, but I see somebody's whose voice we've never heard. So,
I think no matter what we say about this person is condescending statements and so on, what I see from the statement is that this person knows this person very well. And he knows that the money that he's losing now is not for the first time that he's losing it. Yes. So he's objective in what he's saying about this person because he knows this person very well. Yeah, that's my take on this.
Okay.
where's the PowerPoint?
I've heard everybody speaking, and I want to say what I see in that statement. It's a life more than an act. This is who the person has become, without them being aware of what they have become. It is. Let me give you an example of South Africa. This lady lived under apartheid, so she, sorry, she knows nothing beyond being referred to as a kafur. She's now sitting on a wheelchair. And then she hasn't been to shops in a very, very long time. So she was pushed to shops in a wheelchair. And then she sees this black child running around. And then she says to the other people in the shop, please, to hold that black gaffer child. Is that how they put it? Yeah. Hold that gaffer child, because the white people are gonna be very angry seeing him running around like that. But this is all that the woman knows. So this is how he lived. And yeah, I think it's a life more than the act for me. And until that person and leaves or comes, they should die and come back again. It's only death that can erase this. And not death isn't going underground, but death.
Okay, thank you for that. So as we can see, this is very, very controversial. So it won't help matters to know that it was Karl Marx who said that. Mhm. It was good old Karl Marx. Yeah, in a letter written in 1862, he wrote it to his buddy, Friedrich Engels, and he told him those things about this Ferdinand Lassalle, who was also a socialist and quite prominent in the socialist movement in Germany at the time. Now, you see, this is where I think we can take up all these issues about objectivity. And I set up the trap quite consciously to draw your attention to the fact that some people can say despicable things, and these things are despicable, not simply from today's perspective, even at the time they were despicable. And yet this person was able to produce a thought that made all the difference to the kind of people he's describing in that way. A lot of people here on the continent took up Marxist thought as a beacon for their own liberation, right? So the issue of objectivity becomes quite a challenge here. And that's what I would like to try and develop a little bit more in the presentation that I prepared for today. I think maybe we need to agree, or at least you need to know where I'm coming from. So my understanding of what I think are key concepts in this whole discussion about objectivity. I mean, the context within which we can speak truth or we can make truth claims. I think we can make a distinction that takes into account three aspects. So one would be facts. You know, we can claim that there are facts in the world, whether those facts are discoverable or whether it is us who produce the facts, we can leave that question open. And that the notion of truth is one that, with certain reservations, can be restricted to the concept of facts. You know, so truth would be, if you like, a property of facts, or the kind of qualifier we can use to talk about facts. But the world is not only made of facts. The world has also got beliefs. And beliefs can be mistaken or false, right? So, for example, as far as Karl Marx is concerned, we can say that he had false beliefs about black people. Perhaps we can say that. And I don't think that scholars, researchers are completely free from, you know, false beliefs or mistaken beliefs. And in fact, scholars may think that, you know, they may entertain beliefs which they think are true and they are not. And the history of science is full of that. And again, we can take Marx as an example here. What he thought about what skin color makes people do is obviously false, right? It's obviously false. So it's a false belief. But beliefs can also be what philosophers call true beliefs, you know. So true beliefs are those which draw from facts. They are about facts. Those are the true beliefs, right? So I think these are some of the categories, of course, not all, but some of the categories with which we operate in the world. These are the categories that we deploy to do our work and, of course, to make, if you like, valid claims about whatever that we are interested in. Now, Karl Marx is not only known for having made despicable comments about other people, he is known for having developed a theory of history, if you like, which has been quite useful to a lot of people, right? And what you see there on the board, on the slide, is the first sentence, one of the first sentences in the Communist Manifesto of 1847, which actually summarizes his own, you know, his theory, his historical materialism. That is what it is known as. Or other people also talk about dialectical materialism. So when he said, and I'm quoting him here, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. That's a wonderful summary of his theoretical approach. So I don't know how much you know about Marxism as a theory. So maybe I should say a few more things, because I want to use Karl Marx to address the challenge of objectivity. So it's important that we speak the same language. Now, historical materialism or dialectical materialism basically means that history moves through the replacement of modes of production, right? So materialism is the essence of history, and that materialism presents itself as different kinds of modes of production. So the way that communities make use of the world, make use of nature to meet their needs, right? And so you move from what he described as primitive accumulation to slavery, to feudalism, to capitalism, to socialism, and finally communism. And what is typical, or what is essential to each one of these stages is the mode of production. And so history moves, as he says there, through class struggle. So there are always internal contradictions which force our society to replace the mode of production with a higher one, right? A higher mode of production, such that if things go well, we end up where we should end. That is a perfect society, which is a communist society where there is no exploitation of man by man, right? So I'm using Marxist language here. So that's basically what Marxist theory is about, right? Now, as you can tell, this is a lens that Marxism is giving us to look at the world, right? Now, it's not just doing that, it is also telling us, giving us instructions concerning how we are going to establish facts, what are false beliefs, and of course, what are true beliefs. So if you take that, for example, we could say that with this approach, one fact of existence that we can establish is exploitation. That there is exploitation in the world. And of course, we can then value that and say, we can judge that and then say exploitation is bad, right? Exploitation should not exist. Yeah. So if you establish the existence of exploitation, you are establishing a fact. And there are many more facts that you can establish by deploying the Marxist lens on history, right? Now, for example, if you were to think that you are poor because you have bad luck within the context of Marxism, that would be a false belief, right? That's a false belief. It's a false. It's what this is the whole idea, which I think some people have misunderstood when he described religion as the opium of the people. He was not saying, like a lot of people have understood him to have said, He was not saying that religion is bad, tout court, right? That's not what he was saying. He was simply saying that, religion may prevent people from actually looking at the real circumstances that explain their condition, right? So bad luck would be a false belief. It would be a mistaken belief, right? So a true belief in that context might be, for example, the role that surplus value plays in history, especially in the context of capitalism. So how does the capitalist mode of production operate? It operates by producing surplus value. So those people who own the means of production make other people work for them, pay them just enough for them to feed themselves, and they use the rest, to get richer and richer and richer and richer. Yeah, and that is actually the key mechanism for the transformation of the capitalist mode of production. So when people become aware that they are being exploited, right? And when people are alienated from their own labor and so on, and then they gain consciousness, and then they make the revolution, or they change that capitalist mode of production. So here we are. We have a theoretical framework on the basis of which we can make sense of the world in many different ways, right? Now, it is a theoretical framework that will also give us the criteria which we can use to establish facts, to produce facts, but also to know when we are mistaken, when we are wrong, right? And to produce the true beliefs that will enable us to make sense of the world. So, Karl Marx and Engels, they did more than just look at capitalism in Europe. They also tried to understand, because of course their ambition was to explain the world, not just Europe. So I'm bringing you a quote here, which is quite interesting. It's from an article that he published in the New York Tribune in the 19th century, of course. And he's writing about India. And he was trying to develop the concept of the Asiatic mode of production. So we have the capitalist mode of production and so on, the feudalist mode of production, but he was also working on this concept of the Asiatic mode of production. And what he was trying to do with that concept was not only to understand why India was the way India was, right? So what was holding India back from progress? But he was also trying to understand the specificity of European capitalism. So I will read out to you that quote because, I had to make it small because I always try to put the French translation there. So I'm sorry about that. So he says, these idyllic village communities had always been the solid foundation of Oriental despotism. They restrained the human mind within the smallest possible compass, making it the unresisting tool of superstition enslaving it beneath traditional rules, depriving it of all grandeur and historical energies. We must not forget the barbarian egotism which, concentrating on some miserable patch of land, had quietly witnessed the ruin of empires, the perpetration of unspeakable cruelties, the massacre of the population of large towns, with no other consideration bestowed upon them than of natural events, itself the helpless prey of any aggressor who designed to notice it at all. We must not forget that this undignified, stagnatory, and vegetative life, that the passive sort of existence evoked on the other part, in contradistinction, wild, aimless, unbounded forces of destruction, and rendered murder itself as religious right in Hindustan. It's quite a complex quote, but basically what he is saying in terms of his theory, what he's saying is that what you have in India is a society with no internal contradictions, right? Now, pay attention to this. What you have in India is a society with no internal contradictions. What that means is that if a society has no internal contradictions, it cannot change, right? It cannot change. There cannot be social transformation in that society. It's stuck in the past, right? And of course, one reason why Indian society cannot change, according to Marx and Engels, is that there is no private property. No private property there in that society. And also, in that society, there is the primacy of the state, hence Oriental despotism. So the primacy of the state over civil society. Now, these are all things that you find in Europe. And that is why there is change in Europe and there is no change in India. Right? Okay. What this means is the following, and I'll come back to that later on. Marx is known to have actually defended British colonization of India. And the reason for him to do that was that colonialism was going to bring the mechanism that would make change possible in India. Right? I'll come back to that. I just wanted to flag this out because it's very important for the discussion that I want to do here. So I think objectivity now can be spelled out. And I want to spell it out in 3 moments, which I will present as I think the first moment, we simply say that Marx about the world through observation, and that part of what we do as scholars is precisely that, to discover facts. Again, maybe I should have placed the word discover in inverted commas, because there's a sense in which we can also say that we don't discover facts, but that we make facts, we produce facts, right? Now, if we were to say this and leave it at that, of course, this would be quite limited, right? So it's not the case that science, discovers facts about the world through observation. What are facts? And what does it mean to discover a fact? Right? I think we need to take this a step further. It would be too romantic a view of scientific activity. So one way of taking this further is perhaps to say, not that Marx discovered facts about the world through observation, but that Marx aimed to discover facts about the world through observation. And what we're doing by saying that is that we are allowing for the possibility that Marx can be mistaken. Right? So he can be mistaken about not only the way he wants to discover facts, but also, the facts that he establishes. Right? So I don't know if you see the difference now. How different it is to say that science discovers facts and science aims at discovering facts. Science discovers facts. Science aims at discovering facts. I think there's a difference there. Because there, what we have is the possibility of critically engaging with the aims that people are establishing and how those aims are shaped, how those aims are formulated. So remember the categorization I offered yesterday: context and content. Context and content. And of course, the rules by which we then make knowledge claims. But we can move further than that. So we can say perhaps Marx aimed to discover facts about the world through observation by eliminating biases through critique and the accumulation of evidence. Now that's different. That's different because now we are aware that he can formulate mistaken beliefs, false beliefs. And so of the scientific enterprise, which will take into account the possibility of error, of being mistaken, right? But the corrective is within itself. So we correct that by basically facing up to the biases that we may have, because we have biases. So facing up to them, critiquing them, critiquing the whole enterprise, but also accumulating evidence. So evidence upon evidence upon evidence upon evidence. So, okay, I don't want to mount a defense of Marx here, but if I go back to that quote, that unfortunate quote, I might say, well, over time, this person might, faced with better evidence or faced with evidence that, if he's decent enough, he might revise his views on Black people. And if he doesn't, then we have a problem, right? So this is a way of saying that while objectivity is a difficult thing to achieve, it is something that we cannot do science without paying attention to it, right? So objectivity, of course, is always subject to the context within which we try to produce knowledge, but it is also, the difficulty of achieving objectivity is also a very good description of scientific activity. Now we can say, okay, because objectivity cannot be achieved or it's difficult to achieve, then let's give it up. You know, and some people say that, you know, let's just give it up. Yeah. And well, I don't know what the consequences are, but certainly one consequence has been then, you know, to seek to validate knowledge ideologically, right? And so, you know, and of course, the problem with validating knowledge ideologically is that we will end up only talking to people who agree with us. You know, so we will move into an echo chamber, as they are called, these places. So we just hear, you know, the echo of our voice, and we don't learn. And in the previous session, we had this wonderful example of, you know, on gender, right? Yoronke, a woman, when she was talking about the limitations of the concept of gender as it is presented by Western feminists, right? Yeah. So she took it up, and then, you know, she showed its limitations, and then she broadened our view of these things, right? So I don't think that you will get a good appreciation of the challenge of objectivity if you simply describe scientific activity as if it was carried out mechanically. It's people who do science, and people say do science. But not only that, people, you know, engage in a dynamic activity. And that dynamic activity consists in always being aware of your potential biases, always being sensitive to evidence, and fostering criticism. So I said earlier on that I was going to address one issue here, and that is the issue of weak and strong objectivity. So I could have used other ways of approaching this, but I thought that this particular one suggested by feminist scholars is quite useful and quite good at that. So you know, when they say that we should make a distinction between weak objectivity and strong objectivity. Now notice something. They're not saying we should do away with objectivity. They're saying that objectivity comes in two guises, and we have to be sensitive to that, right? And what is even more important, especially for our context here, what they say is that weak objectivity is the kind of objectivity that is not aware of its potential biases, right? So you only see things from your own perspective, and you are not sensitive to the possibility that the same thing can be seen from a different perspective. There are a plurality, there's a plurality of perspectives. So you need to take that into account. So on the one hand, you have homogeneity, which is weak objectivity, and heterogeneity, which is basically strong objectivity. So this is not to say that we have an opposition between, let us say, Western objectivity and African objectivity, right? That's not the statement that people are making here. The statement that people are making is that, you know, just as Western objectivity would be a limitation, African objectivity as well would be a limitation. We should strive for a scientific enterprise that acknowledges the existence of different ways of looking at things, and then out of that, construct our knowledge. Out of that, produce our knowledge, and out of that, seek to expand the scope of concepts. Right. So I've got a quote there by a German anthropologist of the last of 19th century, Max Müller, who said, "He who knows one knows none." Yeah. He who knows one knows none. And I think this has been actually the problem, if you like, with social science epistemology. That social science epistemology, so social science theories of knowledge, are based on one worldview. And that is why we have a problem with that epistemology, because it's only based on one way of looking at the world. And so a lot of the critiques that we are formulating today have as their goal to open science to the plurality of perspectives. You know, so when we talk about post-colonialism, when we talk about decoloniality, when we ask whether the subaltern can speak, you know, when we do all of those things, we are aiming at opening up our ways of looking at the world and taking them into account. Okay, so things are getting more and more technical, right? So let's move on. I want to come back. To this idea of, you know, how then we construct knowledge. Well, knowledge is what? Knowledge just claims that we make about the world. You know, so we talk about what is the case, as it were. Right? We say what things are like. Yeah. So I've got that thing there, projected there, which is my way of trying to conceptualize the morphology of knowledge claims. Right? So what I'm saying is that for me to be able to make a claim, I need to have reasons for that claim, or I need to draw from facts to make that claim. Right? Usually I give a simple example, right, to explain this. So for example, I could say Paseka, who is sitting next to me here on my left hand side, I could say Paseka is South African. That's a claim I'm making. Yeah. And what makes that a claim? What makes it a claim is that I have reasons for what I'm saying. If I had no reasons for what I'm saying, that would not be a claim. Yeah. So Paseka is South African. Now, what could be those reasons? What could be the facts that I'm drawing from? Well, I could say he's got a South African passport. You know, I looked into his bag and I saw there the South African passport. Now, the question here is, does the fact that he has a South African passport justify, you know, or prove my claim that he is South African? No. It makes it plausible. It makes it plausible. But there's something that's happening. There's a link between that claim that Paseka is South African and that he has a South African passport, there's something bringing those things together. And that is a logical inference that I am making. Or to use our own language as scholars, I'm using a theory. What's the role of theory? The role of theory is to organize facts such that I can make claims from them. Incidentally, that's the role of proverbs as well. That's what proverbs do. Theories are proverbs. Yeah, theories are proverbs. Yeah. So if you want to decolonize, start there. Okay. Okay. So I could draw from a generalization. I could say anyone with a South African passport must be South African. So it's that inference that allows me to make that statement. Yeah. So the link is there. That's the link. Anyone with a South African passport must be South African. That's it. Now, I've given you a few ways of thinking about inferences or theories. You know, of course, every discipline has its own theories, right? Just like, you know, in sociology and political science, we can draw from Marxist theory, you know, because that is what Marxist theory does. It helps us to organize facts such that we are in a position to make claims about the world. So, you know, we make generalizations like I've just done. We could use analogies. You know, analogies are quite, you know, if you think of proverbs, a lot of proverbs are based on analogies. You know, we can look for clues, signs of things. Of course, in science, causality has always played an important role. And interestingly enough, even an appeal to authority, you know, I mean, I don't know, you will appeal to authority when you leave this summer school. Maybe when you're going to have conflicts with your supervisors, because you're going to say, yeah, but Elise Makamu said so. Yeah, you're appealing to authority. Yeah, and sometimes an appeal to authority can be a valid way of rendering a statement plausible. I mean, we appeal to authority most of the time. We say, the doctor said so. You know, COVID and all of that. We were constantly appealing to the authority of researchers. We didn't understand the thing. You know, we didn't. We just trusted the authority of those people. And of course, principles also are quite useful in that respect. Yeah. Okay. Are you with me? Yes. Okay. We think so. Yeah. Good. That was for effect. Okay, let's continue. I want to come back to Karl Marx. Because Karl Marx, he claimed that British colonialism was an unconscious tool of social change in India. And he said England has to fulfill a double mission in India. One destructive, the other one regenerating. The annihilation of the old Asiatic society and the laying of the material foundations of Western society in Asia. I'm quoting Marx here. Right? I'm quoting Marx. Right? So his claim, we can formulate it again: the Asiatic mode of production hinders India's progress. Right? Now, you have many ways of reacting to this. You can say Marx was racist, he was silly, he was, Eurocentric, he was, you can do that. It will not take you far. I mean, within certain university circles, you will go far. Right? But for your own intellectual development, I'm not so sure. So how do you engage with that in a useful, fruitful, and critical way? My suggestion is that you use that scheme of offering there. So you say, okay, what are the reasons, what are the facts that he is appealing to make that claim? So I can go back to that quote I read to you, right? Remember that quote? So he said, the Asiatic mode of production restrains creativity. He also said it promotes superstition, it fosters tradition, it arrests progress, and it stimulates barbarian egotism, and so on. Yeah? That's what he said in that quote. So we can use those things as the facts to which he is appealing in order to make that truth claim he's making about the negative role of the Asiatic mode of production on Indian progress. Yeah. That's what we can say. But there's still something missing. And that is what? That theory, that inference. And of course, we are going to find that in his own work. And that is, his idea of dialectical materialism. And what does that say? It says, for a society to move forward, right, it needs internal contradictions. No internal contradictions, no change. So if you want to change, you need to bring something from outside. And that thing is what? British colonialism. Yeah, British colonialism. So you see, now bear with me for a little while here. I'm not judging. I'm not making any judgment, right? I'm not trying to make any judgment. I'm just trying to think with Marx, right? So it's almost like I'm trying to, I could have grown a bird, but I'm trying to get into his body and look at the things somehow the way he's looking at them. But at the same time, I'm bringing to that my own experience, my own knowledge, my own lived experience. Let me put it that way, to use that phenomenological terminology, right? And what is the goal? The goal is to understand what he's trying to say to me, to see its limitations, but also to see its potential. Yeah. So here is where things get even more interesting, because so far we have only produced a plausible statement. We have not proven it. Marx has not proven anything here. He's just produced a plausible statement, right? And maybe I can say this at this stage. I think one of the problems that we have in the social sciences, and I fear also mainly in African studies, is that a lot of our research does not go beyond this point. A lot of our research that a lot of our research is about showing that our statement is plausible, but we don't take that step, additional step, to demonstrate the plausibility of our statement. So let's continue. How can I demonstrate this? I can demonstrate this by basically taking up that theory and looking at it in concrete circumstances. So if it is, okay, I'll come back to Paseka, right? Or should I say Steve?
No.
Okay. Okay, Paseka, formerly known as. Okay, so Paseka, I said Paseka is South African because he's got a South African passport. Anyone with a South African passport must be South African, right? Now, how do I demonstrate that? I demonstrate that by looking up South African legislation. You know, I go, what does it say about citizenship? It says all South Africans are entitled to have a passport, and only South Africans can have a South African passport. I have demonstrated it. Yeah, I have demonstrated it. And often what happens in social science research is that we don't take that additional step. We stay at the level of rendering something plausible. Yeah. So it's the same thing here with Marx. What we can do is to look for evidence of transformation through, you know, the changing of modes of production. So let's go and look at a real case. So for example, let's look at India, because British colonialism was there. So let's look at India and see what happens in India if there is transformation because of the presence of British colonialism. Now, Marx, he was surprised, negatively surprised when he looked, because what he saw was that British colonialism was wreaking havoc on Indian society. So it was quite the opposite of what his theory was actually saying. So there was no transformation of the mode of production in the way he expected it to happen. He only saw the British stealing money from India. You know, he only saw Britain impoverishing India. Right? Now, okay, so this is my own quarrel with Marxism. You know, if he had been a decent person, he should have abandoned his theory. He didn't. You know, so he said, well, no, but, you know, so that stuff that Thomas S. Kuhn talks about in the structure of scientific revolutions, you know, so that, you know, paradigms are simply superseded. You know, they are, you have to abandon them, paradigms, because people are caught up in those paradigms. They don't move. So you need younger scholars who will have the courage to go beyond, right? It's also really the basis for Karl Popper's criticism of Marxism as non-science. You know, when he said, you know, you cannot falsify this. It doesn't force you to change your theory. And in ideal circumstances, what should have happened, I mean, some people did that, and I'll say a few things about them, is that, you know, you have to revise your theory. You have to revise it. You know, you have to do that conceptual work we were talking about. So this is, for example, what Latin American scholars did, what our own Samir Amin did. You know, when he started talking about delinking, you know, one of his first books was on delinking, right? When he realized that there is no way in which Africa will develop within a capitalist system. Yeah, within a capitalist system. Because if you want to make change within that capitalist system, you will simply reproduce the capitalist system. So you can say that, Samir Amin did what Marx himself did not do, faced with counter evidence. Yeah, you can say that those people who produced this dependency school in Latin America, Fernando Henrique Cardoso and so on, people in Brazil, that they also went beyond Marxism. They revised the theory to take into account new evidence. Remember what I said about confronting your own biases and respecting new evidence and so on. Okay. So this is basically what I have just said. That the situation on the ground was actually different. So there was British colonial brutality, the impoverishment of people there, the transfer of capital from India to Britain. Okay, I'm almost done. In fact, I'm done, right? I just wanted to say that while we should have we have legitimate reasons to have misgivings about objectivity, I don't think that we are only left with the option of turning our back on the notion of objectivity. Objectivity also gives us tools to engage critically with the process of knowledge production. And I've just made a suggestion here concerning how we can do that. But of course, there are many different ways in which we can do that. And what I think is even more important is that we need to find ways, I think, which will allow other people to engage critically with us. If we want to keep our own knowledge immune from critique, we're not going to learn. And maybe we're not going to render any service to our continent. Right? So we can, of course, for example, and it would be legitimate to do that. We can say, oh, he's racist or she's racist. Oh, this is racist nonsense. This is Eurocentric and so on. But if our own statements, our own claims are immune to critique, then we're not there yet. We are not there yet. Okay. So don't clap now in case you wanted to. Do you have any questions or comments?
Merci pour votre présentation. J'avoue qu'elle a été très belle comme celle d'hier d'ailleurs. Je pourrais dire 1 à 2 questions. La première question, c'est essentiellement d'un point de vue méthodologique. Vous avez présenté l'implication d'un cas théorique et ses inférences sur les résultats. Ce que j'aimerais vous demander, c'est également de prononcer sur les inférences méthodologiques qui peuvent avoir sur les résultats. Parce qu'on le sait, la manière de produire la connaissance selon différentes approches méthodologiques peut aboutir à des résultats qui pourraient être différents. Et vous avez également fait part toujours de la théorie à partir de l'observation de Karl Marx. Moi, je me dis qu'on peut produire des résultats, ou du moins de la connaissance scientifique, selon 3 approches, 3 postulats. La première, c'est de partir sur la base de constats, qui, bien sûr, est ancrée dans l'observation. La deuxième, c'est de produire des résultats sur un sujet qui n'a jamais été questionné. Et la troisième, c'est de mettre en confrontation des résultats issus d'un même objet de recherche, mais qui sont divergents. Et si on s'en tient à l'observation ici des auteurs qui ont abouti à des résultats différents, comment est-ce que on pourrait mobiliser une théorie qui pourrait apporter une lecture différente aux résultats qu'on aura trouvé? Ce sont mes deux questions. Merci.
No, I think those are very good questions. Just quickly, concerning the last question that you asked, I mean, that is why science is a collective enterprise. You know, science is a collective enterprise. And what happens within that enterprise is that we are always working towards finding common ways of talking about things, right? And that implies that we have to be attentive to differences in the way that we approach things, appreciate the potential and the limits of particular ways of looking at the world, right? And being sensitive also to what our own perspective does not allow us to see. You know, so I don't think that the idea is that at the end of the day, we will all see things the same way, right? I think that's the old positivist idea of science. It doesn't work anymore, right? Not even in natural science, in the so-called hard sciences, it works. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, that flows from, that's your first question, that flows from the methodological approach. For example, those people who do qualitative research, a lot of people who do that, they are not sensitive to the fact that for qualitative research to work, it has to favor a particular approach, right? So, I can look at the world, for example, from a dialectical perspective. What does that mean? It means that I'm looking for contradictions. I'm looking for the solution of those contradictions. So that's Hegel, that's Marx, thesis, synthesis, and antithesis, right? So, because I'm looking at the world in that way, there are a lot of things about that world which I will not see, and that's okay. I could approach something using, let us say, a phenomenological perspective. And what a phenomenological perspective means is that I concentrate on the lived experience. So that means that I will fail to see structural conditions. And it's okay. We cannot do everything. I will just illuminate that one aspect. That's it. And those are methodological choices that we make, and we need to make them. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I think I had some issues to clarify because I could not understand on what basis that Karl Marx made his conclusion about the Asiatic mode of knowledge production, where he has to shed in the fact that he is restraining creativity, promoting the supposition, and fostering the this thing. So I could not just understand because when we looked at the colonies, what they succeeded in doing is to write our own story. They have succeeded in writing our own story. And in writing our own story, when they came at first, they reject what we have. They believe that the knowledge production that we were doing is not sufficient in development or triggering development. not knowing well that I view them as to be maybe spy. They've come to study what we have in the pretext of condemning it, but inside them, they make the best use of it. And that's why even in the education curriculum, because I passed through the education system I've been teaching for some time, you realize that the curriculum is designed in a way that it has to suit either, if you're a British colony, for example, like my country, it has to suit the British pattern of education or any other form. So I think there is high time for us to know that our story belongs to us. And in order for us to do with it, we need to write it in the way that it suits us. Not in the way that to come and say that it is not a knowledge production or it is not fostering development. And honestly, I viewed the concept, you said it yesterday, and I want to reiterate on that. When the colonial knew that they are losing their grip, what they decide is to bring religion. And in the name of still that mental colony, which is still caging us into that form. So if you receive it without looking at the inside of it, without valuing what you have, then you tend to Europeanize even your own mode of living. So in this point, I think what we have to know, yes, Karl Marx has said his own opinion, and this will bring me back to what I have just said when we were looking at a statement that was addressing a friend. Yes, they can say it about us, but I don't think we should be gullible either to receive what they said about us, or we should be so reactive to what the Europeans or the global north, let me put it in that way, what they are saying about us. If I am called as a Negro, I'm called as a black, that is your own perception about who I am. But if you are trying to relate me to a particular, it's just like, for example, at a time when I was staying in Indonesia, and someone looked into my face and told me that I was told over the history that your grandparents lives on trees. I said, if our grandparents were animals, then it's those animals that gave birth to Asians. So then we are your grandfathers. So he took offensive over that, and I went on my way normal. So I think we just need to redefine what we have. And when we do that, they will be able to know that we are the pioneer of development and knowledge production. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. So the whole point of this, I mean, we should not forget that we are heirs to social science, to Western science. You know, we are all trained as researchers within, within that framework. And so that is our point of departure. So we cannot afford to ignore, for example, Marx. We cannot afford to ignore Foucault. We cannot afford to ignore Kant. We cannot afford to ignore any of the people who created the tradition of scholarship, which gives us voice, which enables us to talk meaningfully about our world. But we have a duty to go beyond that. And that's what we are trying to do. We have a duty to go beyond that. And I think we have a duty to respect the standards of scientific work in a way that maybe those who propose them have not done. Right? So that's the point. You are right about almost everything that you said, but we have to go beyond. We have to have the ambition I was talking about yesterday. That intellectual ambition is very important. So I mean, I remember I don't know if I should say this, but I remember many years ago, I was on the scientific committee of CODESRIA. And, we had very good people on that scientific committee. Samir Amin was on that committee. Sulman Bashir Diagne was on that committee. Shamil JP from South Africa. Many people, many very, very good scholars. And, sometimes our discussions would move in the direction of, say, oh, he's racist, and I was much younger then, and then I would say, yeah, but I don't think that's the main thing. Why don't we try to show that they are bad scholars before they are racist? They're doing just bad scholarship. And if I can show that this person is doing bad scholarship, I don't care about his racism. Yeah. So that's it. That's it. Okay. Wait, I think there was one there. Oh, okay. You go. You were the last one. You go, and then you, and then you, and then you, and then you are the last one. And make short statements.
Oui, merci. Merci beaucoup, professeur, pour votre exposé quand même. C'était très, très intéressant. Et l'exemple de Karl Marx aussi pertinent. J'ai en fait un certain nombre de préoccupations et peut-être je vais commencer par ce que vous avez dit tout à l'heure en parlant de votre position par rapport au débat qui a eu lieu au niveau du CODESRIA, quand vous avez dit tout à l'heure Bassirou Diagne, Samir Amir, et que vous parliez de mauvais chercheurs. Je vais mettre cela en rapport avec ce que vous avez dit aussi lors de votre exposé, en parlant l'objectivité est très difficile à atteindre. Quand vous dites cela, est-ce que cela veut dire que l'objectivité est très difficile à atteindre parce que la subjectivité pourrait constituer un obstacle et qu'elle serait inhérente à l'humain et que l'homme, du fait du faillibilisme, ne peut pas ne pas faire des erreurs, ou bien est-ce que cette objectivité serait plutôt un idéal vers lequel nous tendons, en ce sens qu'effectivement, que l'homme est un être qui veut toujours comprendre les choses et qui va jusqu'au fond des choses, mais il ne peut pas effectivement boucler la boucle. Il ne peut pas faire corps avec la science, il ne peut pas faire corps avec la vérité. C'est pourquoi, de mon point de vue, il faudra peut-être parler de l'objectivité négative et de l'objectivité positive. J'entends par objectivité positive cette tension, cette conquête vers le savoir. Un savoir qui est un idéal, mais un idéal au sens kantien du terme. Par idéal, quand on parle d'idée régulatrice, c'est-à-dire ce qu'on ne peut pas réaliser tel quel, mais sur quoi on peut régler notre conduite. Et l'autre objectivité, en fait, c'est de vouloir s'enfermer dans des catégories. C'est comme l'exemple tout à l'heure du texte de Karl Marx, où Karl Marx, effectivement, si on veut le placer dans son contexte en disant qu'il a vécu dans un contexte raciste, ou bien que Karl Marx, effectivement, n'a pas pris conscience de l'inexistence d'une nature humaine, là également, on pourrait aussi le déresponsabiliser en pensant qu'il n'est pas responsable de ses affirmations parce qu'il est victime de son époque. Et moi, je l'ai toujours dit, il n'y a pas de siècle raciste, il n'y a que des hommes racistes. Et autre chose également aussi, est que, voilà, continuant toujours par rapport à cette façon de déresponsabiliser certaines déclarations, c'est aussi de mettre aussi, d'inclure également ce que j'appelais tout à l'heure l'objectivité négative, qui consiste à se dire que non, l'objectivité est difficile à atteindre, on peut être victime de croyances négatives. Or, être victime de croyances négatives dans une discipline scientifique, dans une discipline, par exemple, comme la philosophie, où l'on sait très bien que la philosophie repose sur le principe de la pensée critique, sur le principe, effectivement, de la rationalité, sur le principe, effectivement, de se départir des préjugés. Mais, en fait, au lieu en fait de se départir de ces préjugés-là, mais on on donne corps à ces préjugés-là. C'est-à-dire qu'on parvient à scientifiser ces préjugés-là. Et c'est là où, effectivement, le problème se pose. Comment peut-on arriver, sur le principe de l'objectivité, à scientifiser, si le terme existe, le préjugé lui-même? Par exemple, ce qu'il a dit tout à l'heure en disant que, puisque tous les noirs sont ceci, donc X est un noir, donc X effectivement ne peut pas ne pas faire autant. C'est ça qu'on appelle l'essentialisme, qu'il faut peut-être remplacer, bon, qu'il faut peut-être substituer au principe, à l'existentialisme, qui repose sur le principe du devenir et de la responsabilité. Voilà, merci.
Thank you for that. I think that's the distinction you are making between negative and positive objectivity is very useful, I think. Especially because, if I understand you correctly, we produce knowledge within a context where we have to acknowledge our own fallibility. We can always make mistakes. We will never achieve certain knowledge. Even in things that we think, because we see them working, and so we think that it's that safe knowledge. We see planes flying. Maybe one day we will come to realize that planes were flying for completely different reasons from the ones that we believe now, right? And then we will all be scared, thinking about all those times when we flew, we boarded planes, trusting on the authority of engineers who actually didn't know anything about what they were doing, right? So this is to say that you are right about the distinction, and also about emphasizing the the notion of this horizon, that it is an ideal, right? And in admitting that, we don't necessarily have to agree, for example, with Karl Popper, that falsification is the way to go, but we can, right? Because that's precisely what he is saying to us, that we should be humble to acknowledge the possibility of being wrong, and we should change. So as far as as you know what's the word here, so there is this what you were saying about all the things that we can build into what we claim to be knowledge. So for example, all the things that Marx thought about black people, I don't think that those things, even if you build them into theories, that they will stay there. Because since science is a collective deliberating enterprise, we will smoke those things out, right? And so today we know he was wrong about what he thought was true about black people. We know that, right? And maybe people knew that even at the time when he was saying those things. They knew it, right? So I don't think that we should focus too much attention on the potential mistaken beliefs that we can build into our theories. Because if science is this deliberative, open, collective enterprise, we will smoke those things out. That's the point. We will smoke them out. Yeah, as we have done with a lot of things. We've gone a long way, actually. Okay, so we are coming into trouble now, but we still have a lot of people who would like to speak. So, Lebanon.
Oui, merci beaucoup encore une fois, monsieur le professeur, pour la parole m'accorder. Je crois que vous avez déjà répondu à un certain nombre de mes préoccupations, justement, quand vous avez, avec les interventions de monsieur Omar, parce que là, j'avais une question consistant à savoir si, si l'objectivité est universelle ou relative, ou alors si celle-ci est unique ou plurielle. J'ai trouvé la réponse quand vous avez distingué justement les deux types d'objectivité, parce que là, je comprends que l'objectivité forte, c'est ça l'objectivité plurielle. Et c'est l'objectif positif selon la considération de notre ami Omar. Maintenant, la seule question qui reste pendante, que je voudrais vous poser, c'est celle-ci. Alors, est-ce qu'en sciences sociales, la construction de l'objectivité ne part pas d'abord de la subjectivité? C'est ça un peu ma question. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that's what we are talking about, and we've been talking about since yesterday, right? That there is a context that founds our interest, and so because of that, subjectivity will always play a role in the knowledge that we produce. So we have to be sensitive to that, right? So we may be blind to biases because of our subjectivity, but because this is a collective enterprise, our other people will call us out on that. Right. So I'm acknowledging subjectivity. I don't know if that's the best word to use in that, but I'm just acknowledging the role of values in knowledge production. Right. I don't think that you can have value-free knowledge. Yeah. And so the question is then to know what to do with that. Yeah. I don't think it's a goal of science to produce value-free knowledge. We've gone beyond that now. Yeah. Now, how those values, what they look like, that will differ. So your values may not speak to me, right? And at the end of the day, the question is, um, do I have good reasons to accept your claims to knowledge as valid or not? That's, at the end of the day, that's it. And even if we decide that we can only validate that ideologically, that's fine with me. Yeah. Okay.
I think how you described Marx is just an example of the arrogance that is prevalent today, that dismisses meaning, that gives people a sense of belonging, whether it's religion or tradition, rites or rituals. I think colonialism is guilty of this. Even our governments today are guilty of this. And even the way sometimes human rights operates is also guilty of this. Organizations. Yes, organizations. Coming with the idea that we can decide for people what's good for them without even engaging with them or asking them what matters to them.
Yeah, I mean, I come back to this. There's no value-free knowledge. So and I don't think we should be ashamed of that. That's not, that's, I've seen you. That's not the point. But it's to be aware of the effect which that knowledge can have on on our ability to make truth claims. That's all. Yeah. Okay. Well, your goods are there, and then the last one will be Ethiopia. Okay, so go ahead.
Thank you. Please, I don't know if I understood you right, but I would like you to throw more light on a statement I heard. relying on theoretical frameworks as complete guide while being sensitive to our own biases. Like, what I want to know is, should we rely completely on the theoretical frameworks we are adopting as our complete guide while being sensitive to our own biases? I'd also like you to throw more lights on what you said, that for qualitative research to work out, it has to favor a particular approach. Please, sir, what do you mean by that?
So the first question is simply that we work always within theoretical frameworks. So we reflect on the problems within a theoretical framework. And then it is within that theoretical framework that we have to look for things that might um, have a negative impact on the quality of the knowledge that we are seeking to produce, right? Of course, this does not mean that if you want to challenge Marxism, you have to be a Marxist, because you can look at Marxism from outside. I'm not a Marxist, for example, but if I want to be fair in my judgment of a Marxist perspective, I have to take it seriously, and then from within it, see what the problems are, but also hopefully also see what is good about it. So that's what I'm saying. Now, the other stuff is much more complex, qualitative, because that's really about qualitative research. And maybe I shouldn't have said what I said here, because now people are curious. But I often do methodology courses which try to explain that. It's basically the idea that we have modes of intelligibility. So we have ways of rendering things intelligible to us, and there is no neutral position from which to look at the world. So rather than trying to mask that, you should confront it head on. So I said, for example, you can look at things dialectically or phenomenologically. You can look at things hermeneutically. You can look at things causally, ethnographically, and so on. And so there are so many ways of looking at the world, right? And then depending on how you choose to look at the world, certain things will fall out of your field of vision. And that's okay. It's not wrong. It's okay. So like I can study corruption qualitatively, but I can take, let us say, an ethnographic perspective. And what does the ethnographic perspective say? It says, look at a culture sharing group. So I can look at the police corporation as a culture sharing group and try to understand, corruption within that particular context. That will give me, a sense of corruption as the outcome, of the values prevailed in that particular corporation, But maybe what I will miss out in that approach are the structural constraints, for example, the political constraints, and so on. So that's, yeah.
Please let me try to rephrase what you said if I understand it very well. For example, if I am working and I'm using qualitative methodology, I should not just go ahead and say I'm using a qualitative approach. I'm going to designing my research this way or that way, and I'm using unstructured interview guide, KI, IDI. I'm supposed to use a particular perspective. I'm supposed to say I'll be adopting a phenomenological approach. Okay, that is what you mean, sir. While also leaning on a theoretical framework too.
So yeah, that's it. You approach the world, you acknowledge that you have a particular way of approaching the phenomenon. That's what you do. And I think a lot of qualitative work fails to live up to expectations because it does not have a clear approach. You know, there is no such thing as simply qualitative research. It's qualitative research because it is privileging a particular approach. That makes your work more coherent. Yeah. You're welcome. Finally.
It's okay.
Good. I love Ethiopians. So, okay, I need to show something there. You see, one day I'll be called to account because of what I said. Anyway, so just before we go to lunch, this is what I would like you to do this afternoon, right? So what I want you to do is again to meet in groups, right? And then just choose someone in your group who can share his or her theoretical approach, the theory that they are deploying to do their work. And then replace that theory using a proverb. Look for a proverb to stand in lieu of that theory. Use your African knowledge, for heaven's sake. Okay, so let's meet again at 2:15. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.